Help me. Anyway, turns out that little beat oil.
Right.
And so they're taking their deep.
Yep, perfect. Okay. Okay. All set? Okay. Good morning, everybody. We'll go ahead and follow the order. We do have a quorum, I believe, by one person, which is good. Just briefly, meeting objectives for today. Right in front of you, was planning to review, discuss, and address comments on the draft plan that John and team have been distributing to us for review over the last couple of weeks. Perform a consensus on the draft that was distributed, what was that, Friday? And then we're gonna start planning for our public meeting in November as well. So looking for a motion to approve the agenda for today.
I make a motion?
Then, we have had several meeting minutes and summaries distributed here in the last couple of weeks as well. I had a few comments to the September 9th summary and minutes that I communicated to John yesterday.
Let me pull those up really quick, just because. Did have a fair number of comments on the minutes. Read that, or should I make it a little bigger? Most of, Michael, your comments were kind of centered around the operations and clarification of how they're operated. So a little bit of rewording, a little bit of clarification. I'll just scroll through them here really quick, but if there's anything anybody's ask a question about, feel free. Simulations were extremely conservative, I guess. How you've got it here. The need for USGS there. Clarification on operations again, and sediment loading. That's basically it.
Questions on any of those? Was it, everybody had a chance to review those, feel comfortable enough to move forward with approval? Okay. I'm gonna ask for a motion for approval of the August 21st, September 9th, and October 2nd meeting minutes and summaries then.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Second.
Opposed? Okay. Good then. All right, John, turn it back over to you.
Right, let's see. Newsworthy items, there was another Water SC meeting last week. Joe Kuhn is not here today. Leanne, do you want to give a summary of last week's Water SC meeting?
I talked a little bit about it.
Just the highlights.
Well, a lot of discussion about the drought act and potential. I don't even know if I want to say changes, it's more. There was, some people want to look at it, having it be more robust, that sort of thing. I believe at one of our OGC, Marshall Taylor gave a little bit of a update, or it's not really an update, but he talked about how like you can't really make certain changes versus just changing the reg. And I mean, I don't know if you were there. I don't really know what else. It was a lot about the Drought Act, and I
Yeah.
a little bit early, so I missed.
There's been some discussions that have stemmed from the Drought Act discussion about kind of rewriting and combining the Drought Act and the groundwater law and the Surface Water Act into one comprehensive water policy, which would be certainly a big lift. But there's some folks on Water SC that think that would be a useful process to do. So there's debate and discussion around that. There was a little bit of discussion more on water reuse, and Trish Kilgore from Newport Jasper came and talked a little bit more about water reuse. Yeah, that pretty much covers it, I think.
John, how was the water reuse, received and what was that discussion?
It was received well. There wasn't a whole lot of discussion around it. There's a lot of support amongst water ST folks for water reuse. There's really not any noticeable opposition or significant concerns around it. So it will be highlighted in the state water plan, and there seems to be momentum behind it. Okay. To Leanne?
Yep.
Yeah. All right, that's really only the newsworthy items. I think, state water plan itself has been moving forward. Water SC has been reviewing draft chapters. I think the goal is to have it released for public review in early November still. So y'all may get a chance to see a first draft of it early November. All right, public comment, any members of the public or agency folks that are online would like to make comment? You know, unmute yourself and speak up, or just raise your hand. Nope. All right, moving forward. Okay, one of the first things we want to do is talk about the draft River Basin plan. So first, I have to apologize because this has been a very rushed process to roll this out, just given the time constraints we're under. Y'all have seen the individual chapters, and then very quickly we compiled them all together after addressing comments that were submitted. And there's, I don't know, 50 or so comments. I really appreciate the time y'all put into reviewing the plan and the draft chapters. We have incorporated to our best ability and addressed the comments into the draft plan that was circulated on Friday. I recognize that between Friday and today, you've had very limited time to review this whole plan. I mean, it's several hundred pages. Hopefully you had a chance to review the initial chapters when they came out, but there's been some adjustments and revisions based on the comments. So I'm a little hesitant to move forward and ask you just to approve the draft plan today, because I'm sure most of you haven't had a chance to review it fully. So that's one thing I want to talk about. What we typically do is give the RDCs time to review the draft plan, and then we have a test of consensus, is what it's called, where we vote on how you're feeling about the draft plan on a 1 through 5 scale. 1, 2, and 3 mean you're supporting it, which has been the typical response, and 4 and 5 means you have significant reservations. Do you feel comfortable today doing the test of consensus and moving forward based on what you've seen so far? Or is there anything that gives you hesitation where you would want to revisit something that's in the plan, or talk more about it because you're not comfortable with what's there, or you just don't understand it, or you just want more time? What are your thoughts?
I need more time.
Yeah, I'm going to second that.
Okay.
But I don't have any concerns or hesitation so far, but I just feel like to do my due diligence,
Yeah.
I just need more time. I've gotten through a lot of it, but I haven't gotten through all of it.
Okay.
Does anybody else feel that way?
If it's gonna have our name on it, we need to read it.
Yeah, that's my concern. I hate to really push something out without proper time to read and review it. Now, that said, we have tentatively scheduled the public meeting for November 8th. And what we try to do is advertise the public meeting 30 days in advance. And Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, but typically when we've advertised the public meeting, we've also released the draft plan at the same time. But I'm not sure that's a requirement. So I guess what I'm wondering is, could we advertise the public meeting and release the draft plan a week after we advertise it, which would be maybe the end of next week? You have any thoughts on that, Scott Carter?
Typically, in the past, we have tried to make sure the plan was available 30 days in advance. I'd have to go back and look at what the framework says there, because I do believe it may be 30 days, but I'm also think that perhaps we can make an exception in this case due to the time constraints that we have. So let me look at the framework, and I think if we have to you have to send it out a week later and you still give 3 weeks notice. I think that's probably, we can make that work. Okay.
Okay,
I think if in your original public notice, if you have in there specifically when it will be available to review online, that ought to pass muster. You've given the people notice
Yes.
of what meetings they, and then they know when they're gonna be able to review the report.
Right.
I would think that that ought to be accepted. Again, I don't know what the state law is. I know in bidding projects, we'll advertise a project to bid, and we may not have the plans and specs ready, but as long as we specifically tell them when they will be ready, as long as we're giving contractors 2 weeks.
Yeah.
We're fine.
I kind of agree. And once we have the public meeting, then the public still has 30 days, a month to provide comments, and then we close the comment period. And I think that's more the important part. So they'll at least have the plan for 30 days after the public meeting and then 3 to 4 weeks before the public meeting.
So just
I
to
think-
make sure. Go ahead, Scott.
Sorry, no, I was just gonna say, I think we can make this work, John.
Okay.
Yeah.
The alternative would be to ask you all to review it by like Thursday of this week. So then we could make any updates and changes and then put it out for public review beginning Friday, which would be 30 days before November 18th. But I feel like that's just too rushed.
John, help me understand so I know. Unfortunately, we had a few minor comments that I wasn't able to submit by last Wednesday on just small chapter comments. I would also like to review the plan. Are we to provide you comments, or is this just, the plan is what it is, and I'm trying to get comfortable with my vote, whether it's gonna be, I agree, or I, have major reservations? Will there be time to edit between now and whatever date we decide?
Yeah, I would like to allow time to edit before end of next week, if that's the date
Okay.
we decide to send it out. So ideally give you all of this week and maybe a couple days, Monday, Tuesday of next week to submit any final comments. We would address those comments. We would send out an updated version next week with a little log that highlights, hey, Alan submitted a comment on chapter 2, page 3. To respond to that, we've made this edit. So you don't have to read the whole plan and try to figure out where those final revisions were. So that would be what we try to do.
Perfect, I like it.
And that's assuming we don't get a lot more comments, which I don't think we will, I mean.
Yeah, I just had a few editorials, so, not material changes, so.
Okay. Is that amenable to everyone? Kind of the process I just explained, give you until, say, Tuesday, end of Tuesday next week to submit any final comments. So you've got another week to review it as a comprehensive document. You've got the executive summary as well. I'd really like to get your comments on it, because that's most likely what 90% of the people will read. That work for
I
everyone?
think that's the best we can do in the timeframe we've got available.
Okay.
If we do that timeline, when would you want us to vote on our feelings on the plan? Like when we need to do the consensus test?
I would ask you just to email me your vote and I'll talk about what the votes mean later today, but I would just have you email it to me. I'd say by like Wednesday or Thursday. So if we do get some comments back and we make some final revisions, I don't think that's going to serve anybody to vote. I really doubt it would. But still want to give you the opportunity to see what final revisions we made and then give your vote. So I'd send out an email giving you instructions saying, give me your comments by end of the day Tuesday. We'll turn around and send you an updated draft with highlighted revisions by end of the day Wednesday or Thursday, and emailing me your vote, that day, something like that. We include the results of the test of consensus in chapter 10 and in the appendix. So I need to update it after I got your test of consensus votes in. I'd like to get everybody's in there, but the last couple of River Basin councils, there's been a few members that didn't really review it, didn't provide their vote. And I just noted that they didn't provide a vote. So we'll keep the train moving either way.
See it fire.
They get a firm reprimand. No, they don't get fired. Everybody's busy, so it's hard to sometimes fit this stuff in, review it. Okay, that will be the plan. And I'll formalize kind of the dates I need everything in an email. That'll come out later tomorrow, but for all intents and purposes, you have another week to review this and submit comments to me via email, and give me a call if there's just a section that you want to talk about and discuss. I did circulate the comment log. Hopefully y'all had a chance to look at that. You can actually filter the comment log. Say you want to just look at Jason's comments, you can do that. You can just hone in on what crazy things Jason had to say.
Yeah.
But no, there's, I don't know, 50 or so comments, I think. Yeah, 50, no, 60s, 69 comments, which means people are reading this, so thank you.
So,
If anybody have a chance to look through the comment log and you have any comments you want to talk about, we'll do that now. I'm not intending to go through any of these one by one by any means, but if something jumped out at anybody, or you made a comment and then you weren't comfortable with how we addressed the comment, that's what I want to talk about now.
Did you get my email that I sent you yesterday?
I saw your email about the Pinewood site. You were mentioning.
So I think the older I get, the more conspiracy theorists, right? And I've been listening to what I was digging around and you know, they're, what do you call it? Leaching, whatever. They're still leaching 930,000 gallons a year. That we spend $4 million, $4.8 million every year, our state, taking care of. Like, to me, that's not, they may be managing it, but what if somebody just decides, well, you know, maybe we don't want to spend this anymore, but they're committed to spend that until 2103.
Yeah.
Right?
It's a scary place.
If
you live on this
the whole idea to me is like, it's one of those great, it'd be a great 48 hours, one of those television shows where like, who screwed up here, right? So I feel like, I don't know what our role is there, but I feel like somebody should mention it somehow. Because it's not, or maybe we may know, like, I don't know what the appropriate thing for our committee to do is. So he needs to somehow be mentioned, because suppose he didn't know about it. But we don't know about it. Who else knows about it?
That was the primary reason I wanted to be on this committee.
Committee. And people get old and nobody asks their opinion anymore, and then we get senile and they don't believe what we say. And pretty soon the next generation just forgets about
I
what
would sympathize.
There's lots of people who don't even, believe, people walked on the moon, right? So I just think it sounds crazy. But the more I read that, I'm like, 950 million gallons are leaking out every year. Like, what are they doing? Getting Tupperware containers and putting it in? Like, I don't know what they're doing. But they ought to be doing something, and they obviously are, but what if they weren't? It's insane.
I dove deep into that because I was so fascinated about it. And like you said, it's concerning that we wouldn't have known about it, and it's a hazardous waste landfill.
And people love to forget about things that they did wrong. Right?
So it's good that they're collecting the leachate and treating it, because if they're able to, the more they can collect, the
The
better.
best can see found.
And so that's actually good.
Yes.
And then I'm not trying to be condescending or anything, but, and then they are putting it through a treatment process, which is also good. What would happen if they weren't? That's a good question. But I even downloaded the data and I went through it, and I was surprised at how low the contaminants were even before treatment. I was surprised that they were low. I mean, they're there and they're contaminants, but it wasn't like scary considering it's a hazardous landfill. And they were doing the volatile compounds, the semi-volatiles, the metals, everything. And I'm not saying I went through every piece of it, but I did look at some things and I was like, wow, this is not as bad as I thought it might be.
I like to think the worst stuff came out first.
Hopefully that's true. It seems like it's well managed. It's just the point of, it is state funded every year, it's
$4.8 million, right? Think what we could do with that money. And I guess, did they time the disintegration, whatever, to 2103 and decide that that's why they stopped, because it's all gone?
It's just 100 years. I think that number is just,
They take 100 years.
So they would have to reevaluate as that time came
Like a
based
chemical
off of the
evaluation.
actual analysis. You know, is it still a problem? And then they renew based on the results, whether it was still a problem or not.
I think if we just have some red flag in the report saying, look, this is a concerning committee. It's a concerning committee and it should be watched carefully.
Yeah.
So you still have the recommendation about wanting to learn more about it. And I don't think Robert Boyles is online.
There's probably a good
But-
object lesson for like what not to do.
Yeah.
Like how to, you know, what mistakes remain.
It was politics. It was just pure unadulterated politics that got that.
But I think you'll have the opportunity next year, assuming y'all continue to meet, to learn more about it. And I mentioned Robert Boyles because I think he said he knew the site administrator or somebody that's responsible for the site. So,
yeah, it sounded like they were open to tour.
right. And you may be able to get a tour where you can go see all the site controls that are in place and how it's operated. And that might help understand what the risk is associated with that site, if there is any risk. So it's noted in the
Great
plan.
school, talking about educating, make a great like high school chemistry or science tour and how they, like the whole science of how they filter and whatever they're doing with these contaminants, process them, they're theoretically not a contaminant. You know what I mean? That's really amazing.
They also get inspected regularly, both for their hazardous waste landfill and for their wastewater treatment. And they had, and they have monthly reports. I mean, I dove deep and their, inspection reports were good too. The only problems they had was that they didn't monitor for a couple of parameters once. And I have a feeling like they probably pulled the sample and there was a problem with the sample, anything like that. This, they had them for others, so.
Now, and I can't remember, where did we land in our recommendations for what we were gonna say about that? Was the other thing, I was just,
That we wanted to know more about. It was pretty loose, wasn't it? It
Yes.
just felt like it was important and a concern.
Maybe we need to keep an eye on those
Yeah, yeah.
people. Let's go over once a year and we can take Alicia and she, you guys can look at reports and we'll do a field trip and have a picnic.
There we go. This is the recommendation right here. Just you endeavor to learn more about the site, including the regulation, consent orders, controls, and monitoring in place.
As long as we have it mentioned in the plan, and we do, I feel good about it.
I still think that's fair, especially if a future iteration of addressing water quality in the basin, then
We're not an oversight committee, and that's not our job, but I think we should be more informed. Mentioning it is important.
So does that mean that every RBC needs to learn and understand what it really wants? Is that what you're saying? I think that's good because,
Well, it's on our radar. If it becomes a problem, we can do something. But if it's not a problem, we'll just continue to be educated about it.
Non-hazardous site, watershed, be aware of it.
yeah. Do we have any other things like that anywhere in the state?
Sure, there's a lot of areas that are closed, controlled, monitored, inactive legacy type of landfills. But I want to say the state has a good handle on where those are, and I'm more familiar with North Carolina, which has been going through a closure process for what they call orphan landfills that weren't properly lined and closed decades ago.
Like this one wasn't?
Well, this one's on.
It's a hazardous waste.
Hazardous part was on.
Oh, it was, okay.
Yeah. What I'm talking about more is just legacy municipal solid waste landfills that don't have the same hazardous constituents that have been disposed there, hazardous waste typically. But I mean, to your point, there's plenty of potential sources of contamination throughout the state, but the thought is that most of them have been identified and they're controlled and mitigation has occurred or remediation has occurred. But that's why there's ambient water quality testing that DES does and utilities doing their own testing. So the thought is there's plenty of controls to help prevent any potential risk to drinking water. That a fair statement, Jason? You're the source water expert.
Yeah, I mean, there's no shortage of RCRA sites and other sites that need to be monitored and stay on everybody's radar. Thanks to DES doing their monitoring program and DNR doing the things they do and the utilities doing what they do, I feel like if one of these sites was to become a real problem, they're already being addressed, but if they were to become an immediate concern, then it would be addressed. So.
And I just want to know, so over time, does this stuff lose its contaminant strength?
There's natural attenuation that occurs for
Kind of like-
contaminants.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, by default, sometimes that's the approach to remediation, is allow for attenuation to occur, but
Right.
not necessarily.
A lot of the river sites, they'll remove soils, and then they'll also do a combination of groundwater monitoring wells around it, kind of like what's going on in this site. It just depends on the type of contaminant, the type of the site. There's a whole industry around remediating these sites, and there's regulations specific to how to remediate these sites. So beyond the scope of what we could probably talk about here.
And it goes into water quality, which we, didn't address in this plan, but we did state that in the future, it would be good to go to look into water quality. So that's when we would probably go into the different, contributors and their effect on it in the future.
John Crago raised his hand. John, did you have a comment?
Oh, yeah, I just noticed, just as part of what we do with Friends of Congaree Swamp is we just put eyes on the groundwater monitoring reports, often semi-annually or whatever, that DES requires for a couple of the sites around us, Westinghouse, solid waste landfills, and some industrial sites. And I mean, it's useful to have someone keeping eyes on this. There's lots of good information in those reports. The tendency I most often see is that sometimes, with the semi-annual monitoring, you could see that maybe a facility is operating under a consent agreement or a consent order, and conditions aren't really improving. And they're stable but not really improving. And the idea under a consent agreement or a consent order is eventually reach a state where conditions have improved. And sometimes it's helpful to be looking over DES's shoulder and just kind of point out these persistent problems, and is there really a long-term plan for these being addressed or not, and kind of bringing that to the attention of local government officials too, besides DES and the company or industry itself.
Okay. One thing I want to bring to y'all's attention is a conversation, some back and forth we had with Michael last couple of weeks regarding Chapter 5, which is the water availability assessment and modeling. Michael has been doing some additional modeling where he's been adjusting the triggers, so mainly the fish passage release rule, which we've talked about. That's the 5,600 CFS release that occurs March, April, and part of May. And we had included that in the model, and we were trying to, continually support that release, but recognize that Santee Cooper has some ability to cut that back. In fact, they would preferentially eliminate that release if it was during those months, if they had a hard time maintaining their rule curve, their guide curve. So Michael's simulations in the model were centered around, how much easier is it to avoid those shortages that we see in 2007, 2008, if you relax that rule a little bit? And we had it set so that it would be triggered to be relaxed at a lower elevation, 1.5 feet or so below the guide curve, or 0.5 foot above the bottom of the guide curve range. And Michael relaxed that a little bit to what he thought was likely to be normal operations. And it does, in the current use scenario, eliminate the shortages for Santee Cooper Regional Water System, both on Marion and Moultrie, which is a good sign. But in the moderate high demand scenario, it still sees a shortage. So it's kind of on the razor's edge, really, of whether there'd be a shortage or not using that monthly time step model. you have a little better ability to eliminate that shortage, but it still gets pretty close if you do a daily time step under those three planning scenarios. So we were trying to decide, should we update the model runs and relax the rules officially? And what we landed on was, well, let's keep the ones they are, but add some discussion about how Santee Cooper has the ability to relax those rules. And depending on, when they relax them and what conditions are after that, there may not be a shortage as we had modeled it. Hopefully that makes sense to you all, but Michael, did you get a chance to review how we made changes and was it acceptable to you?
I have just briefly, yeah, I had a couple little minor wordsmithing comments in a handful of those sections that I'll get to you, but yeah, in general, I think, given the time constraints we've got, it's appropriate. And I do think the additional framing is really helpful and very appropriate, that you're intentionally being conservative with this. Because we do have the ability to curtail those operations at St. Stephen if we're seeing a trend towards low inflows and any kind of threat to our ability to keep the lakes at the rule curve. Because it's not a regulatory minimum flow, it's a goal, which is different from the other flows that we have to hold at the Jeopardy station and at our spillway. And it's a substantial contributor. It's the biggest outflow for that period of time.
Right.
So certainly my hope is, additional granularity that we have available that day. And the knowledge that this modeling has shown us, in addition to just our historic, understanding of how the project operates. I do feel good about our ability to keep those shortages from occurring if we were to get the same exact inflow situation that we had in 2007 and 2008. Doesn't mean we couldn't have a worse drought in the future, but I'm good with what we've got here with the kind of the additional commentary on how we feel like it's kind of intentionally conservative.
Okay.
In the way that we're looking at it.
Are there any studies, DNR, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, on the effectiveness of that,
On the effectiveness of
of the fish lake? I mean,
So- there are, but they're dated. And in actuality, what we end up doing at St. Stephen is more of a kind of a pulse flow model. Because during that time period, typically we're seeing peaks in the power demand in the morning. And so we'll run the turbines for a little while, and cut them back. Because above certain flows, I think what DNR has seen is typically that the fish can't actually find the lift because the flow is overwhelming from the turbines. And so they go to the turbines or try and go to the turbines instead of going to the lift. And so what we're trying to do with that is pull them up into the tail race with the turbine operations, and then you shut those off. And now the attraction flow at the lift is actually enough that they can find it. And so
bait and switch.
right, basically. Yeah, so that's actually been proven to be more effective than what was kind of envisioned in 2007 when we signed the settlement agreement that outlined all those goals. And another 20 years of operations and kind of honing things in has proven that to be more effective. So I think the bottom line is we can probably still meet some of those goals for DNR even in a low flow year without also jeopardizing the reservoir. And there's no ability for this model to account for that. So it's just because it doesn't have the granularity to be able to do that. And that's no slight against the model. That's just kind of the reality of modeling at this scale.
So is it fair to say, based on what you just described, that the 5,600 isn't necessarily a magic number or anything? It's more on how you operate the turbines and kind of pulse the flow to get the proper attraction to the ladder?
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
Okay.
It was supposed to be 5,600 on a continuous minimum basis if it was available when they signed the settlement agreement that set the flows back in 2007.
Yeah.
18 more years of kind of working with it and trying to figure out what actually is most effective up there has kind of proven that continuous isn't necessarily the optimal situation. So, which works both to our benefit and the DNR's benefit, because we're able to get the power when we need it during the course of a day, and we're also seeing better passage numbers. So.
Okay. All right, good.
Can I just repeat back, make sure I understand? So you did some work with the model and researching some other stuff, and based on the 2007, 2008 drought conditions, you feel like, kind of unofficially, you could mitigate to the point where we wouldn't have the impact that the more conservative model, to where we wouldn't have the shortages that we expect
It's really,
potentially.
it's really close. but
Yeah, okay.
I think we could, and even if we still solve the shortages, we do have contingency plans at those plants to still be able to withdraw below the dead pool elevation that we used as well. So they're
And
not
that's based on the current,
intake.
conditions and not.
Current demands,
Right.
right?
Current demand, yeah.
Yeah, it was different when Michael was focusing just on the current use demands and adjusting triggers there. We took his same adjustments and ran the moderate and high demand models for 2070 demands. And at least at the monthly time step, we saw that there would still be shortages. I don't know if Cam did it for daily or not. Is Cam online? Sure, but certainly under the permitted and registered scenario, which is an unlikely scenario, but there were shortages. And at the high demand, I believe there were for daily, but I'm not positive. There certainly were for monthly.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, any other topics that you want to talk about with regard to the draft River Basin plan, or any comments that you had made that or didn't get the chance to make, but would like to make now, that we want to discuss as a group? Alan, you said yours were all pretty minor editorial stuff.
Yeah, I don't know that there were some comments in chapter 5 and 6. Some of that was related, I need to go back and look at my notes, but it seemed like it was just related. One, inserting data centers into chapter 5, references NPW, references the groundwater point of depression, but doesn't discuss data centers. Seemed like that was an omission. And I can't remember my chapter 6. Give me a second, I'll be right to it.
Okay.
I was just asking Michael about Riley being gone and the gentleman was gonna take her place, and he was gonna check with her on some things. Maybe you're gonna come.
I haven't heard from Robert or Riley. I was hoping one of them was going to be here today or online, but I don't think neither of them are online. They're not here, so.
I think that was about the length of time for
The permit.
permitting you like shorter versus 10 to 20 years, right? That was one of the big subjects. That he thought that she thought one thing.
I think John Craigo kind of outlined that even he was more amiable to the shorter term, which made us keep the original language that we had discussed, so.
Yeah, we kept the range of 10 to 20 was discussed, but we didn't really settle on anything beyond that because I think both John
Well, I
and
know we
Riley-
talked about not even using the numbers 10 to 20. So maybe you have more discussion after.
Yeah, I think we decided without using any numbers, it leads the reader to whatever their interpretation might be.
Right,
which
super
could-
vague. I love.
Yeah, 5 or 30
I
or
don't even like
50
that
or
one.
2 or, right, so.
50, 70, 2,
Right.
if you don't say something.
Well, it's currently 5. Then my comment on that, it's currently 5 today.
There's
So
nothing
that's where we
predicted
are.
for finance.
They're saying we want to stretch it out.
Yeah.
So, I don't know that, I guess I understand John's hesitation, but I don't understand if he's looking for the distance between 5 and 10. Because that, otherwise we are at 5. So again, I reiterate my comment, I think it's 10 to 20 or beyond. Otherwise, why change it at all? We're suggesting they be longer. So I'm in favor of clear, firm language that it's 10 to 20. Or why change it all?
Right, and I think the question still is floating around about using numbers versus not. I mean, that was my mental recollection, which could be completely wrong during the last meeting.
Yeah.
Because they were talking about taking your language out, your edit out. So I was super.
Well, his language was to change it such that the choice is 10 or 20. And the problem is that's a false choice. We had a conversation about a lot of different times spanning frankly shorter than 10, in other words, keeping it the same. Or at least I felt like even 20 doesn't reflect bond issuance and bond funding and
And
capital planning
financing.
cycles. So
Okay.
I don't want to limit us to 20, especially in as much as we don't change surface water walls at all, then we're at 30 to 50 currently under the law, which is, I would much rather 30 to 50 than the line groundwater at 5. But we had a robust conversation, and
I guess John's not on today.
he is.
John's here, yeah. Yeah, John has his hand raised, so John, do you want to chime in?
Oh, yeah, I just know, I mean, I was, very much appreciative of, why, a longer review period was necessary for some changes under permit renewal, but, I'm sure there are, many changes that are reasonable under the 5-year period too. So I think it kind of depends on what's identified during the permit renewal.
Yeah, if we're diving back into this one, I guess 2 ways to look at it. One, I can live with this, right? It's better than what we have. I still feel like it's not very clear. Like if I'm reading this and I think, I'm trying to read it, John, here, but it says with some RBC members, here's the part I had an issue with. Some RBC members mentioning favoring shorter periods. Does that mean shorter than 5? Like, what does that mean? It's not clear to me. And because we're already at 5, so I don't understand the point. I wanted clarity on that.
What if it was favoring shorter than 10 years and
But is
others
that true?
frequently? Yes, there's multiple, both John and Riley mentioned maintaining 5.
Maintaining 5?
I thought Riley was over to 10.
Yeah, I felt like even the agency was open to 10 and felt like 10 was reasonable. So I guess maybe that is supposed to.
I mean, if everybody's good with 10 plus,
Yeah, you could just say 10. I guess that's where I am. I feel like they need clear direction. We're already at 5. I felt like we had consensus that 5 was too frequent. But maybe I'm mistaken.
I remember asking DES that question. They didn't really have a sense that 5 was just what it was.
They
didn't
chose
have
5 as a knee-jerk reaction to some things that had happened with surface water, was my understanding, years ago.
Leanne, do you have any?
So 5 was chosen before the surface water, so that, it wasn't due to that.
Okay.
It was, from what I have been told, it was chosen when they came over from Water Resources. And Water Resources had basically re-upped all the permits before sending them to DHEC. What became DHEC, and then so when DHEC was writing the regs, they said, well, we would like to review these permits, so they did it for a 5-year renewal.
Oh, the 5, Leanne, had to come after the surface water.
Groundwater was first, so groundwater was in 2000.
They already had, but you know, Jason, all of these surface water withdrawals already had, I guess you're right, it's not permanent.
There was no surface water law until
we didn't get a permit until 2014.
Right.
So it's registration that does.
Well, they weren't even, they were, yeah, they were registered in a sense that they were reporting to the department, but there wasn't a permit.
So, I mean, if John and Riley and DES are okay with 10, then we could change this to review periods of 10 to 20 years were discussed, with some favoring longer periods. We can cut out the shorter periods. But I don't want to say 10 to 20 when I already know I want more than 20 years. I would vote to maintain where it's currently at. So I don't want to get rid of more.
10 or more,
10 or more, yeah, why don't you say 10 or more?
as long as nobody disagrees with that.
So John, give you the opportunity. Are you comfortable with 10 as a minimum? Or would you be comfortable with 10?
Well, I mean, wasn't there some discussion too, though, that it's on DES's part that how well was the 5-year permit renewal working for them? I mean, I thought there were some logistical issues involved with keeping or being able to meet that standard.
Leanne's shaking her head, not really.
You know, we haven't had an issue doing it. It's more that is it, when you look at groundwater as a resource, because changes can happen more over a longer period of time, it might seem like 10 years could be a reasonable amount of time instead of renewing every 5. But logistically, it hasn't been an issue. We're finishing up our PD renewal right now. And we don't have an issue doing it, so.
And I would encourage you all to make your own recommendation. Certainly listen to what SCDS has to say, but this is your recommendation, not DES's recommendation. So,
Mhm.
I guess my point originally, Ron, it seems like a circular statement. We're already at 5. And there's language in here that suggests 10 to 20, and then there's language in here that says shorter. So if I'm the lawmaker, I don't know how to handle that. We're at 5. Are you telling me that you want them from 0 to 5 years? I just feel we need to clarify this. That was my statement. One direction or the other, I can live with 10 or longer. I think that's fair. But it just seems if I'm reading this and I hadn't sat in the room, I don't understand what you're saying. You're saying 10 to 20, and then in the next sentence you say favoring shorter periods. And that's just not clear to me. So if we want to make this a clear statement.
yeah. So, John, Grego, would you be comfortable if it said favoring 10-year periods?
Well, again, I'm kind of curious, and I'm sorry, this seems like maybe a rehash of the discussion we had before. Like I said, I'm really sympathetic to the longer review periods when there's substantial infrastructure that needs to be invested for any permit changes. But I don't know. I kind of like having eyes on permits every 5 years, just in case some acute problem comes up that that it would make sense to address in that time frame. And so I just think there are some problems that don't need the long time frame to be resolved, and plenty of them that do.
Are you gonna say something?
I was gonna say, so currently with the 5 years for groundwater, we do, the year prior to the renewal, we do an evaluation of the area. So you could mention something like continuing with 5-year reviews, unless they see an issue, go to the 10-year. I mean, I don't want to.
I guess I have a question for you. I'm thinking I'm probably the heaviest groundwater user in the area. And we have been, I'm sucking it up. And we have been watching our trends since 1980 something. And we've made small adjustments recently. Our first permanent adjustment ever was 3 years ago, and we've been watching it for 15 years. Or more.
Yeah.
So the 5-year cycle, if anything, has been a paperwork issue and exercise for you, where we've only had our first adjustment, right? So over the course of monitoring it since the 90s, we've had our first adjustment. Where I'm going with that is, for one, it's slow. The largest user in the area, it's been a very slow permanent adjustment. My question for you is, for any of us, if you saw an acute issue, something that we couldn't explain, with any resource, be it surface or groundwater, you have the ability to step in. Is that incorrect?
And groundwater, I would say probably yes. With surface water, I'm not so sure, depending on the type of permittee it is.
So true. So with groundwater, which is our current bullet we're discussing, you feel like if there was an acute issue, which we haven't seen, but if there were, there's language in that permit to alleviate John's concern that something may happen so quickly that a 5-year cycle is not enough to catch it.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why when we get for instance, when we get the water use report, if we notice that maybe there's a huge jump in use from previous years, we contact that user and say, hey, if it was a water supplier, did you have a lot of leaks this year and you're able to potentially resolve, or did you even notice that this happened? Or if it's some other user, we ask, was there a change in your process that has caused this sharp increase? that sort of thing. And I mean, we don't, like I said, we only do those evaluations on a 5-year basis. So, but if, let's say, the hydrology group has gone out and done their hot map run, and they notice some great change in aquifer or in water level that from the previous years that they had done that run, we would look at that and maybe look at the users in that area too. So I mean, that's another avenue for that type of.
So John, maybe a suggestion for you. It sounds like, the agency does have, certainly can prevent acute issues regardless of these cycles. Would a compromise position be for Jason, yourself, to say something along the lines of 10 years or longer or discuss with evaluations every 5, or leave that out altogether? I mean, it sounds to me like there's a mechanism to prevent what you're concerned about.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, I think yeah, I mean, by what's been suggested though, it actually sounds like DS kind of always has eyes on groundwater renewals, but something like an evaluation every 5 would be, I mean, I think that would be appropriate language.
I just want to note that we're aware of what's going on in the groundwater because of our network. So we can see dips quarterly, we can see them all the time, and we talk about them freely with our permitting group if we notice that there's a decline in groundwater storage in an area. And so it's not something that's done every 3 years. It's something that we're always working on. We have a very robust monitoring network that we are continually.
Language in there that, John, what about, Brooke makes a great point. We're all looking at this all the time.
All the time.
What if we put,
I agree.
what if we put in this paragraph, if we embed it, that we continue to support DES's continued monitoring efforts of groundwater resources?
She's got her finger on it all the time.
Yeah, just as a consumer of that information, I mean, I'll mention it this time. I like checking, about once a year, who's using what groundwater in the county surrounding the park. And DS's groundwater has always been super responsive about sharing that information. Yeah, it would be nice to note that DS has eyes on it continually. Mm-hmm.
So John and Jason, are y'all in agreement that if we clarify this language to say periods of 10 years or more, and also include in there the DS is continually monitoring them? Are we good with that amended language? I think that provides much clearer direction for this paragraph. I mean, Jason probably meets your need.
A 10-year, if you put 10 or more, people are going to hone in on the number 10, which is 25% of the current review period length for surface water.
You want to say 10 to 50, 10 to 30? I mean, what you want to say there?
I mean, I get that it's a doubling of the groundwater review period, so I get where you're coming from on it. I think part of the challenge is we're trying to marry and align groundwater and surface water, which they're similar but very different resources, and a very diverse group of stakeholders here. It's going to be very challenging to get everybody super excited about the language.
Are you living, or so you telling me you're living with 10 to 20? You're living with it as written?
I've got a scale of 1 to 5 on my approval of the plan, and I'm not gonna say right now whether changing this would change it from 4 to 3, but it's this kind of details that our officers and board will be looking at, and specifically to go from a 40 or 50-year review period to a 10-year review period would potentially be a big problem.
Well, let's leave. Why don't we do this? Here's my recommendation. Jason is concerned about the language, but really doesn't have clarity to it. Leave it at review periods of 10 to 20 were discussed. Clarify the shorter periods that we've discussed with John. So remove that language, John, and insert DES is continually looking at it. And to me, that's a much better written paragraph.
I'm sorry, I thought you would be happy. I'm confused.
I think it's important to say that
Jason just.
while others prefer longer review periods, I just don't want to cut out.
Yeah, yeah, leave
my
that in there.
opinion.
We said 10 or more, right?
Yeah, leave that in there.
For Charleston Water, their surface water user, and they have long periods in that now.
Right. Yes.
So
Some RBC members favoring longer review period.
Yeah.
There you go.
it's just
I
groundwater.
mean, you could also change it to say that some believe that we should maintain the current review periods within the surface water regs. I mean, I'm not gonna budge from our position on that. But it's just one vote.
Makes you appreciate it. I was like the
We can, I mean, we did this in some other plans, including the Edisto. We can be more clear about specific RBC members' concerns and how they would recommend the recommendation be, if you'd like. This one is trying to capture everybody's concerns and wrap it up into 3 or 4 sentences, and we're struggling with that a little bit. So we could just list each individual members, or not every individual members, but, you know, the different ideas that we discussed, and leave it at that. Say there wasn't consensus around this, with some favoring 30 or more and no alignment of ground to surface water permit renewal periods, while others, including the majority, favoring more alignment of the review periods and shorter periods of 10 to 20 years.
I think it's stronger if we have agreement. If we can't reach consensus, I would be in favor of, you know, putting votes beside it or something so that whoever's reading it next understands that we were, you know,
Yeah,
all but one agreed to this. I think it's stronger if we all agree to it.
Can we make a suggestion to think about it? Are we all in consensus that the groundwater permit maybe can have a longer review period, and we don't want to non-consensus on surface water? Maybe they just kind of are separate.
Yeah,
statements.
I was
Like,
just
maybe
asking
having
that, should we need to
consensus about groundwater.
separate the discussion between groundwater and surface water and say permitting?
Well, I think that sentence, my understanding of that sentence is we're talking about groundwater, right?
It says
For me, it's both. Like, I think only it's specific to this groundwater.
yeah, I mean,
So maybe-
Alan, you were the one that proposed this initially
Yeah.
under the thought that there should be alignment.
I
And that's
agree
where
with
we
that.
started.
Yeah,
So-
I agree with alignment.
Yeah.
If we're getting hung up, I agree that groundwater at 5 is too short.
That's certainly what your concern is.
Right.
Right.
I agree with both of those statements.
Or do you feel more strongly about increasing groundwater review period than you do for aligning surface and groundwater?
Personally, I feel surface water is too long. 50-year is just too long. And I feel 5 is too short. That's just my honest opinion. And I think they should align for ease of the agencies and for stakeholders. It's
Do you
confusing.
agree with that or disagree with that?
I mean, the current law's 30 to 50, depending upon the type of surface water withdrawal, but to me, 30 is a reasonable compromise. The challenge is when you're trying to compromise between 5 and 50, that is a huge range, and
But would you agree that alignment is important? You know, not,
yeah, alignment to 30 is a really good thing.
but not even a year. So take the year out of, do you think alignment, state of South Carolina, not for me or for you, but for the state of South Carolina, do you think alignment is important in permitting?
I think alignment's always a good thing.
Okay, so we agree to that. So now we are that, so alignment is important. That matters. And now we're down to these terms. And so what is the language? If we think alignment's important, and this is written the way it should be,
Yeah, I think we're back to
it's a matter.
where we started with these suggested revisions, and that may be as good as we get for this.
And so, yeah, how do we wordsmith the years so that we're comfortable?
Between 5 and 50 sounds good.
5 is not good, somewhere between 10 and
10 and 50. 10 and 50. I just love the red letters, 10-year right there.
The other piece of this from a surface water user perspective is if reasonable use is being applied universally, then you're more willing to consider maybe a compromise on the term of the permit because you've got a better shot at getting what you need if reasonable use is being applied universally. And right now it's not.
And that would, yeah, I agree with that. Which goes back, yes, some of alignment, I like that.
What do you think? Do you like it as it is with edits, recognizing that we could spend a lot more time talking about it, but we're still probably not going to come to consensus?
we're in a chartreuse bucket. It's the biggest bucket we've ever been. We're swimming in the chartreuse bucket swimming pool.
I would wordsmith this, it would be 10 or more years instead of 10-year between.
That would make Jason happy. Does it make anybody unhappy?
I'm about happy, but is
That more years should be plural.
Or more, favoring 10 or more year periods.
with some
Yeah, periods.
As long as we keep some members favoring longer periods, it's a pretty good compromise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that language.
John Grego, is that okay with you if we make these edits, but we certainly leave the longer review period note here?
Yeah, thumbs up.
Thumbs up, okay, yes. Okay,
All right, John, your original question before we got sidetracked or diverted, chapter 5, and I can send you this, but it was really just, it discusses, underutilized deeper aquifers, public use. And we felt there should also be mention of data centers in there because we know that's a pressing issue for South Carolina.
just simply mentioning the potential impact of data centers and.
Yeah, well, it's talking about NPW, cone of depression under Mount Pleasant Water Works. So it's specifically mentioning us as a user of public supply wells and that we need to explore deeper aquifers, underutilized aquifers. And so I believe our concern, Mount Pleasant's concern is just we feel a real competitor for water will ultimately be data centers or could be, has been passed. And so calling the matter at least mentioning that and the aquifer that we felt was important.
Okay.
And I can send the group that. And then in chapter 6, there's some specific discussion of contaminants and recycled water and reused water. And so we have some language for that. But just to clarify what those contaminants may be.
Okay. Hickson, did you have a comment?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, and maybe this is helpful context, but I think we've seen some alignment on the state level, perhaps in what we're doing to this water plan and the Department of Commerce, because the Department of Commerce decided that they were no longer going to incentivize data centers. So there may be some acknowledgement sort of across different tiers of government that is an issue.
Excellent.
Okay. It's good information. I think there is, well, for example, maybe Tricia mentioned this in Virginia, they've helped incentivize data centers by offering reclaimed water programs. So there's like 20 data centers that run solely off of reclaimed water that's been provided to them. That certainly is.
I was in Chicago last week talking with site selection consultants, many of whom represent data center projects, and some are not even using water anymore. The technology, I think it was either Dutch Shell or British Petroleum, have basically come up with like coolant jellies, and some aren't even using much water. But that's a semantics point. I'm not saying that to throw a wrench or anything or to distract from what we're doing in the plan, but just worth mentioning that I think a lot of folks are recognizing that that's an issue, and data centers have adjusted as well because they can't find sites. There are very few sites in the US that have sort of a traditional data center type capacity. Nobody can deliver 400 to 500 megawatts in 2 years. No one can deliver 3 million gallons of water a day. It's just impossible.
So I heard Japan recently put one, deep sea. I don't know what they do with electricity. That wasn't discussed, but for cooling water, they were using just the benefit of the cold ocean. Just don't know how they got power to it, but I think you're right. Power is the real problem.
Surprised the salinity wasn't a problem.
Yeah, they were in these things, they look like stainless steel, they'd be capsules.
Again, I didn't mean to derail this with that, but I feel like that was important to mention that alignment, that this is something everybody's recognizing.
Yeah, no, I think, again, it's good information. Okay, I did want to talk quickly about, where did it go? The here it is. Implementation plan and revisit our decision about prioritizing, if we want to try to prioritize. Hickson had made the suggestion of maybe a Gantt chart, a Gantt type chart, which we've created a very simple one here, would help us decide if we should try prioritizing any of the actions within strategies that are nested within objectives. All we came to conclusion on at the virtual meeting was to prioritize objectives 2 and 3, which was communicate, coordinate, promote findings, recommendations from the Basin plan, and 3, improve technical understanding of water resource management issues. And we said those are higher priority. And I think some of the justification behind that was that those are things under the RBC or under RBC control. All the actions fall to RBC members for that. So they shouldn't fall, or should be categorized as higher priority. But do you all want to consider prioritizing actions within any of the strategies or objectives? Yeah, Hickson, did you have another comment?
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. I think that upon kind of looking at the different objectives, 2 and 3 were genuine, like those are things that we could actually control as an RBC. So those should be items that and we actually achieve the other 3 goals by doing objective 2 and 3 well. So if we do objective 2 and 3 well, we improve water use efficiency by, advocating for better legislation and regulation. So when we're out there doing objective 2 and 3, we're completing objective 1, 4 and 5.
Yeah, good point. That's a great observation. So any desire to try to prioritize any actions within objectives? Again, I'm not trying to force you to, just want to give you that opportunity now that you kind of see the timescale of each action's implementation and the asterisks here. Note actions that are primarily in the RBC's court.
How are other RBCs doing education and outreach? Use us some examples of what they're doing for them and then how successful they've been.
They haven't done much, if anything, yet.
Okay.
But every one of them has identified that as a kind of a priority action. That's something they want to do. The state water plan will also identify education and outreach as something that DES is interested in supporting, working with the RBCs and existing groups like Clemson Extension, others that already have water-related messaging. So just hasn't been really done much yet.
I think, I'm not a voting member, but it was, to me, I don't know if necessarily the RBCs have some of the technical expertise, for example, like agricultural conservation, there'd probably be like, I would think that would need to be done in collaboration with other entities. So my thought is like, for those who are saying we're going to implement education and outreach, it's like in collaboration with, partner organizations, we will be doing it. 'Cause if not, I just feel like, I don't know, it's kind of setting up the RBC. I don't know if the structure is there to do that effectively. I don't want to set you up for failure, and then not
Right.
doing those things.
Yeah, I think all the other RBCs recognize that too. Some of the RBCs do have much more robust agricultural representation, and those reps already do a lot of this stuff and themselves are very good at advocating for it. Our RBC, unfortunately, we don't have that same representation, but Sam, South Carolina Department of Agriculture could probably help with that. I mean, they could be a partner agency in education and outreach regarding water conservation measures. Is that fair?
We could help facilitate with SCDA. Doesn't normally do education and outreach. That's usually entirely extension.
St. Clemson, right?
Okay.
Clemson Central.
Clemson and 1890 SC State Extension. Between those 2 extension programs, those would be the groups. And I mean, you got local soil and water conservation districts that do a lot of stuff like that too.
Yeah.
And even all the way through USDA, through MRCS and other programs they offer.
That's a good point too. A lot of the RBCs have soil and water conservation district reps on their councils. We don't have many either. So I think there is a mechanism to better do that. Many of the RBCs.
You've got this RBC stretching up and does it stretch barely into Richland County? Or is it pretty small? But
Barely, I think, yeah.
like Richland County Soil and Water Conservation is, they have that, and they have the Richland County Water Commission too. It's the only county in the state that has that. And they do a lot of education. Their conservation district, so that might be something to tie into all the other county conservation districts in Santee or RBC. There's a county conservation district in every county. All 46 counties have a conservation district. How active they are, it all depends on the funding in the county. I'm assuming Charleston Soil and Water Conservation be fairly well funded, but then like something like maybe Calhoun might not have some.
Yep. Hickson, you had another comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to, I think, summarize those 2 points that were just made, I think, from expert, and that was made. I mean, we're not the experts on these things, but somebody has to be responsible for basically facilitating all of these parties to get information out. And so since we're basically representatives, we're kind of the interface between that. So I think that in terms of what we need to do, she's right. We do need to collaborate because we're not technically all experts. I mean, we all bring so much knowledge. I mean, y'all, not me. But y'all bring a lot of knowledge, the rest of the folks on the RBC, but ultimately we're going to need resources, and I don't see any of us paying out of pocket to set up education, but we do need to facilitate.
Yeah, good point. Hickson, you just dropped some knowledge on us, so you can't claim that you don't have any knowledge to bring.
I appreciate that, but you got to be careful, because eventually my head will get too big and it won't fit in this screen.
Right. Last call, if you want to prioritize any actions.
Wasn't he gonna make a Gantt chart?
That's what this is. Again, it's a simplified Gantt chart, but
It's really nice. I love your chart.
actually Lauren made that. It was his suggestion, but
Yeah.
Lauren, who's not here, made it. Okay. As the plan is currently written, we did talk about objectives 2 and 3 being the priority, and we noted in the plan itself that no priority established under the strategy priority column. We've done that for every strategy and action within each objective, but up front in that chart, we highlight objectives 2 and 3 as a priority. Everyone comfortable with that? Okay. All right. Yesterday, I sent out the draft executive summary. I mentioned I want you also to review that. In fact, I'm almost more interested in your comments on that, just because it will be, more eyes will be on it than the full River Basin plan. All of the RBC executive summaries have followed this general format, have been of similar length. There's a forward talking about the past 10 years of water planning and what the genesis of the planning effort was. There's an acknowledgements page, which lists the RBC members and supporting casts. There's what you might call a executive summary of the executive summary right up front, which is what to know about this plan, and it hits on some of the highlights. So if you only want to read a few pages, you can read these few pages. And there's 3 pages there. So that is kind of the executive summary of the executive summary. And then we kind of go into sections. So there's introduction, purpose of the plan, what questions it's trying to answer, an overview of the planning process, the composition of the RBC, each one of the phases that we walk through, your vision statement and goals, discussion of the Santee River Basin. So this is reflecting information that's in chapter 2 of the plan. Discussion on water demand and supply. And for some reason, this map is not showing up right in the PDF. It was earlier, but I think when I reduced the resolution of the PDF, it skewed it. So ignore that. We've got a couple photos in here we need to swap out, and I'll make one last call. If you have any good photos that you want to send us to include that represent something that's not already captured in a photo, that would be great. Monica and I took some pictures of the vultures and a heron earlier today out on the shore, but I'd rather have some of your photos. Groundwater summaries, water demand summary, some of the water demand projections, water availability summary, which is highlighting the model results. Going back to answering those 4 questions that are mentioned in the first section. What's the current supply and demand? What are the current permanent registered uses? What's the available supply? What water management strategies? Then we get into the strategies evaluated. We list off the strategies that are recommended. Talk a little bit about adaptive management, introduce the drought response recommendations, and then get into all your other categories of recommendations. And those are included in their entirety here. We didn't pick and choose, we listed them all. So you had the most under the policy, legislative, or regulatory category. You also have some technical recommendations and some planning process recommendations. And they're all included in there. We also have a short discussion of your implementation plan, just highlighting the primary actions within each objective. Discussion of funding opportunities, some implementation considerations, and that's it. So it's 34 pages, which is pretty long for executive summary, but again, there's kind of a beginning. The other thing that we could do, which we haven't offered up yet, but in not all, but most of the RBCs, we've created a 2-page fact sheet, 2-page summary sheet. That's a little more appropriate to hand out to like boards and county commissioners or mayors, something that, you know, they just quickly look at within 3 or 4 minutes and they're done. If you'd like something like that, we can easily prepare something, but that's up to you. Any thoughts on
Reduce
this?
this to 2 pages.
I'm sorry?
Can you reduce this to 2 pages?
We have in the other basins, yeah. Yeah. In fact, I can show you an example of one if you'd like to see it.
That's important to give to the right level because I mean, there's a kind of, whatever directions, if we want to make any progress on changing it.
Yeah, most people don't have the tenacity to sit down and read even 34 pages, much less
They
the full
can read their
report. So,
emails. Yeah, that's a great idea. And we could identify people in state government that we wanted to share the information.
Okay. So it's got a paragraph on the planning process. It's got a paragraph on current and future use, including current future demands, a chart on demands, and then the second page just highlights key findings. So results from groundwater and surface water assessments, and then recommendations. Not enough room to include all of them, so we've just highlighted what the RBCs have identified as their more important recommendations. And that's generally it. It's very easy to put that together if you'd like one.
that's warranted.
Okay.
It'd be better if there were more pages because people love voting. I've seen.
That's what the executive summary does.
It's gotta be 1 page.
Yeah, the executive summary's got a lot of photos, but we can't really add photos to the 2-page summary sheet.
It's true. Don't.
I feel like a 2-page summary sheet is most likely what the legislators are going to read, and they're gonna ask from these plans, what's your, okay, we're gonna hand it to them and go, you know, you should read this, and they'll hand it to their aide and go, okay, what do I need to know about this? If they're anything like my experience of working with elected officials, and from what I understand, part of us doing this is to try to advise and inform sound policy. So 2 pages, very, very necessary.
Also, if we need to figure out if there's goals we have with the water plan and certain people in government positions that we need to share this information with, maybe we target those people, like for funding or for whatever the goals are. Do you know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Like Sean Bennett, I was talking to him about this, and this isn't really a committee on, but he could help me, like, get it in the right direction, maybe. You know what I mean?
Yep.
We can figure out who's in charge of what. Right?
Sarah, what you have there? Is that the plan printed out? All that stack of paper?
This is my notebook.
Ah.
This is my notebook of
Okay.
all the minutes that you so industriously read. And I love the paper. You can go back and find it.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Okay, we will put together a 2-page summary sheet. We'll try to circulate that within the next week as well. That's been handy for the public meeting. We print out a bunch of copies and have it on the desk when you sign in. People can take it away. So we'll work on putting something together.
Well, and can I ask, we've talked about funding, right, for some of these projects. SCDES, do we get funding from the same place they're getting funding for some of these projects? Or I don't understand how that works exactly.
Yeah, so it may be clear once you read the draft state water plan when it comes out in a few weeks, there's a funding section.
Okay.
Preceding that section is kind of the next steps and consideration section. So DES is kind of amongst themselves talked about what they're able to fund and support for continued water planning. And then what some other considerations might be where there's not necessarily identified funding for everything, but there's interest from DES and or the RBCs or Water SC of advancing some of those technical studies that you talked about. So those are identified, and there's some funding options that are mentioned in the state plan, but a lot of that's still to be worked out. What DES at least has decided is that they've got some ongoing funding from previous Reviso funding that they can continue to support water planning in the short term. And I think the hope is that there would be continued allocations to support water planning on an ongoing basis. It's just those other technical studies. For example, if you decided or other RBCs decided, hey, we want to really dive into water quality. We want to build a water quality model focusing on certain constituents and do a bunch of analysis. That takes money. I don't think that funding is currently available unless perhaps you do it through like the water program, a different program that does have some funding. Maybe that's what the answer is, but it's just going to be a mixed bag of funding going forward. DES has funding for continued planning for now, but those other studies you may need to.
Well, like if you already do your water quality. Function, okay. Same thing. What the water quality testing that CPW does, right? You're already doing that. You talked about water quality.
Oh, well, we don't test the river for the surface water. We test what we're discharging into the river from the wastewater treatment plant. And we test the drinking water in our distribution system to see if anything's changed in between the treatment plant and, the long distance it comes, but we're not doing testing of the actual river.
The plant's testing it in order to know what chemicals to use, and that sort of thing, block lots and that sort of thing. I mean, that's internal, but.
Right, but, if you're talking about the actual state of the river basin, the municipalities don't test that.
No, so DES's ambient water quality monitoring program is the one that is at a basin scale. They've got designated locations in all the basins throughout the state where they do routine testing. I don't know much more about that program. Jason, you might know more about it than I do, how often they do testing, but.
So not all the sites are supported all the time, but there's a whole host of sites that they cycle through based off of current needs, and changing water quality conditions. So they may take one site that seems to be somewhat stable in regard to water quality out of the current funding year, and then they'll add others. And so you'll tend to have more continuous data sets in more representative locations across the state because they just don't have infinite funding. And then as far as other data sets, you have finite studies that DES will sometimes do. And then water utilities up and down across the state do water quality testing themselves. But different water utilities do different scopes of testing. The bottom line is there's no shortage of data sets.
What does it test for?
Uh,
Besides dissolved oxygen?
as far as the DES ambient water quality.
Yeah.
So, I mean, all kinds of things, like everything from heavy metals, mercury and lead to, volatiles, to herbicides, pesticides, fungicides, to,
Nutrient.
I'm sorry, nutrients, nutrients is a big one. They are gonna usually do specific connectivity and solid oxygen just because they're biological parameters for, fish. And there's just a whole host of them. They've got a really good team in their ambient water quality. They just need better, more funding to do more sites more of the time. But there's no shortage of data. It's there for folks to pull from. So it's all publicly available. And then the water utilities often also have data sets that they will sometimes share. But like Alicia said, a lot of that's the water quality coming into the plants from their sources. And then we monitor the 2 reservoirs that we own for a whole host of water quality parameters. So there's just a lot of water quality data out there.
The EPA has ECHO database where you can look up all kinds of basically what utilities and other entities have reported on what they're using and discharging. And then every 3 years, DES comes out with the impaired waters list. So they're using all the water quality data from the stations and stuff we're talking about to determine what waterways are impaired for different things, like the parameters Jason mentioned, and bacteria is common, and pH, DO. We have one for mercury that's impaired for mercury, the Ashley River is, so lots of different parameters.
Parts of the Atlantic Coastal Waterway have been on EPA's impaired waters list for years, if not decades. Because it kind of sloshes back and forth.
John Grego made a comment too. He said South Carolina adopted a stream too. So I guess they do some testing.
They also do testing.
Yeah.
It's volunteers.
Volunteer testing. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah, John, you have your hand up. Do you want to
Oh, yeah,
elaborate?
besides, yeah, just quickly, besides the SC Adopt a Stream, of course, a lot of counties and municipalities is part of their stormwater program. And if they have TMDLs for some of their impaired waters, they're doing monitoring. I mean, it's basically in the same watershed that DES was originally doing monitoring anyway, but it often picks up some additional streams and tributaries in that watershed that weren't being sampled before. So seems duplicative, but there can be interesting information there too. So that's another. I mean, county stormwater divisions do a lot of sampling in addition to DES.
So I'm sorry, I don't know a lot about everyone's industry here, but is there an amalgam of information? So if I wanted to know that we're having this conversation, all these entities that test, right, different counties, soil conservation, is there an amalgam of information somewhere where, like, if I had a stream that I was concerned about, I can say, hey, have we tested this? Does that question make sense?
South Carolina Sea Grant Consortium put together like a water quality database, and they pull in the EPA data, they also put in any other available data from like researchers and counties and things. So it's through their website, and it's like really more focused on the coastal counties, so they do kind of try to like really synthesize all that data.
And there's also the National Water Quality Portal that attempts to do that on the national basis. But again, it's still people self-reporting their data into the database. So there's no one stop for everything.
VHEC has a nice page for that.
Yeah,
The water atlas.
That's South Carolina Watershed Atlas.
Watershed
Yeah.
atlas is really good.
It's not, I don't know how recent some of those data are.
It gives you impaired water data,
Yeah.
those impaired segments, and
Right.
it's a pretty decent map. But I don't think you're gonna find a one-stop shop like municipalities, Basin probably, grid testing, Alicia, we're doing a lot
Right.
of
It
testing.
seems like a lot of people are testing, a lot of people are doing things for water quality conservation or watching, but I'm wondering, like, if where's like together in one place. You know,
Yeah,
um,
yeah, that's the X page, but it's a pretty decent page.
I think most of the data we collect ends up going to DES. We do several days runs for them on the reservoirs. And sometimes that's a license condition for.
Right, so DES is a great place. It's almost a final.
Okay, any other discussion around the plan itself and executive summary before we move on to the public meeting and talking about speakers and looking at a draft presentation that we might use? That's really the last thing we have to talk about today, or one of the last things. Before we close the book on the executive summary, the draft plan, make sure we're, no other comments there. No. Okay. We decided we're going to hold off on doing the test of consensus, but let me explain what that is. Some of you already know, Jason participated in this before, but for the draft plan, we do what's called the test of consensus. And on the left side of the screen there is the 5-point rating scale that the planning framework offers us to use. And RBC members can give it a 1 through 5 vote. 1 through and 3 mean you're endorsing the plan. 1 gives you a full endorsement. You're really happy with it, like it. 2 means you like majority of it, but there's a few things in there that if it was just up to you and you were the sole author of the plan, you would have done a little differently. 3rd is you still endorse it, but there's some significant concerns that you have, but not enough for you to say, hey, I'm not behind this plan. By and large, 97% of RBC members across the state gave it a 1, 2, or 3. Only in the Edisto Basin where there are a couple representatives that weren't comfortable with it and gave it a 4. And that was more related to the planning process itself and not necessarily the plan. But they felt important enough that they wanted to voice their concerns with the planning process and offer up a 4. Since the Edisto, generally everyone's been voting a 1 or a 2 with a few scattered 3s here and there. That makes sense. Does everybody understand what you're going to be asked to do as far as giving it a numeric vote, 1, 2, or 3? Okay. After we have the public meeting, we accept public comments. Generally, there hasn't been very many revisions needed to the plan to incorporate or address public comments. Trying to think of any exceptions. The Upper Savannah had some really good comments from a couple of lake associations that we made some adjustments to the plan or added some additional information at their request. But by and large, most of the plans, the public comments were generally favorable or just asking for clarification, which didn't result in any necessary needed adjustments to go from draft to final. So for the most part, the draft plans really reflect what the final plans or what's in the final plans. You're going to be asked then to vote on the final plan itself, and you don't do a 1 through 5 vote at that time. You just say thumbs up or thumbs down. You either concur with the plan and you commit to support it, or you say, I'm disagreeing with the plan and I'm not going to support it. That makes sense too?
Got a question going back to the 1 through 5. What do you do with that? Do you come up with a green color at the end that you pull everything together, or you just publish it? 2 people had a 5, 4 people had a 4, whatever.
Yep. At the very end of chapter 10, we just have a table that says, we did the test of consensus on the draft plan, and 8 of the 12 RBC members voted full endorsement. 4 of the RBC members gave it a 2 endorsement with minor points of contention. Okay. So it's a quick summary.
Just curious.
There's an appendix then which has each RBC member's actual vote, and that's all. That's all. The only way that's included in the plan is just a reporting of what the vote was. No more questions? Okay. When I email you asking for your votes next week, I'll again include this slide. But I'll ask that you bring that around pretty quickly so we can document the votes in chapter 10. Okay, the last thing we want to do is talk about the public meeting.
We take a quick break.
We can, yeah. It's 10:39. Well, 10:50, but we'll reconvene. So if you're online, we'll come back at 10:50.
Yeah, it's gonna be.
I was tired of that night.
We're up there for change.
Where did you get this? It's from the same people, it's just different, this is different.
Yeah.
Yeah. And very good comfort food.
All right, we're gonna start up if that's okay while you eat your lunch. And what I want to do is walk through the draft set of slides that we can use for the public meeting. These are just an initial recommendation. Y'all are welcome to adjust these as you see fit. Ideally, the River Basin Council members, you guys will be given this presentation. I'm available to support if you want me to help with certain parts, but my preference would be for you all to volunteer, and each, or many of you, some of you have speaking parts. And that's one thing I want to talk about today is who's willing to speak for which part. But we're also very interested in your input on how this presentation should be. Typically, the public meetings have been 2 hours. But we usually only speak and provide an overview of the River Basin Plan for about 40 minutes to an hour. They say closer to 40 minutes most often. And generally, it just touches on the highlights from the plan. So we'll walk through it here and I'll explain what we've done in the past and look for your feedback.
Get my head around, before I look at a presentation, I like to know who's gonna be in the room, right? Who we targeting this for? I understand the message we're delivering, but who's really gonna show up? Who do we think is gonna be there?
Yeah.
And should we invite our friends? Like, what does it look like? Do we need to be reaching out to our peers and saying, you need to be here? Maybe explain what other councils have done. How important is this meeting?
Yeah. Taking a step back, in the early River Basin councils, we actually had 2 public meetings at the end. 2 at the beginning and 2 at the end. The first public meeting was releasing the draft plan, then we'd get comments, finalize the plans, and then we'd have a second public meeting. So we did that in the Edisto, the Broad, maybe just those 2 actually. And then we started going to just 1 meeting. Who's attended the meetings? They're open to everybody. Had public, just members of the public attend. Sometimes we've had members of boards, mayors, other like utility representatives that weren't on the board but were interested in hearing about it. Had some ag folks come, just kind of a mixed bag. Attendance has been anywhere from like 2 or 3 people.
Right.
To maybe 60 or so.
Apparently you don't feed them.
Yeah, who had 60?
Saluda RBC had about 60, and they put the most effort into advertising, getting the word out.
Right.
RBC members posted on LinkedIn and their social media. DES has a distribution list for all the RBCs and statewide water planning that they announce these meetings to. DES posted on LinkedIn. Brooke, are there other ways that DES advertising this?
I don't know. I haven't seen it on social media or anything.
I've seen it on
I've seen it
LinkedIn.
on LinkedIn, but I assume we put it on our homepage.
I don't know if it's posted as a news release on your homepage. It's certainly on the water planning websites.
It's supposed to be a news release also.
Okay, it might be. And if Scott's still online, he probably knows.
Yeah, John, we usually do a little news item on the DES main page. I'm pretty sure. It may get buried after a few days.
Okay, yep.
Yeah.
What was that?
You don't have to publish it in the newspaper, statewide circulation. It used to be requirement for public hearings.
Scott, is there any,
I believe, when we, in conjunction with posting it on our website, that our media folks will send a press release to a list of media. I'm not sure who's all on that list. So I think that is done. But I don't know all the details of that, but we, that's how we did it at DNR. It would go out to various media organizations. And then when we do the press release for DES, I assume the same thing is happening.
In the chat. From John Gray. I was going to say not if I paid them.
yeah, John mentioned in the chat regarding soil water conservation districts assisting with communication education. This is separate. We'll come back to that one. Catherine Mann, who's with Office of Resilience, said, I'm happy to share with all my local government contacts if helpful. But again, the Salute RBC was successful in getting good turnout just because they did a little more effort in advertising it. And I think I mentioned this before. They also gave away door prizes. So they actually,
Kayak, right?
Save Our Saluda donated a kayak. They had some Yeti coolers or mugs. Food was provided. So
If you feed them, they will come.
yeah, they actually collected some sponsorships from some of the larger utilities and RBC members. Energy companies, Greenville Water, others contributed and used that money to buy cake and some sandwiches and stuff like that. For the Lower Savannah, Salkehatchie, we did this water taste test, which is kind of fun. That was easy to do.
When Jason was.
Yeah. And then CDS Smith kicked in and brought some Jersey Mike sandwiches. One of the ag representatives brought watermelon and we had watermelon available. So there's actually a pretty good turnout at the Lower Savannah, Salkehatchie, which I was surprised because it's a very rural district or very rural council. I wasn't thinking we were going to get too many there, but there was a handful of mayors and other interested officials that were there.
Is this our one swing in the fall? This is it. This is the only time.
Yeah, you're just gonna have
to public.
You're just gonna have one, right? So this is your only chance.
It's probably worth each of us trying to bring a few friends. I mean, this is it.
Yeah.
If you want to highlight it, if you want to make it push.
I mean, obviously we want people that are interested in being there.
Right.
So, don't force your friends, but hopefully they want to come.
I just mean people that are interested that we know. We probably need to do a little work for us to get the word out.
Is it also a Teams meeting? Or is it just in person?
Yeah, we haven't been doing these virtually. They're just solely in person. So it's a mixed bag of who's in the audience. We try to tend to think that folks in the audience are just the general public and we deliver the message. They don't know a whole lot about water planning. That help?
It's great, yeah.
Okay. We'll circle back to that too and decide later if y'all want to do anything in addition to just your own networks and your own social media posts and talking to others with regard to advertising or trying to entice people to come.
November 18th, what was that, a Tuesday, Thursday? I can't remember what.
Is it Tuesday?
Tuesday, I think.
Okay. And what's the date of Thanksgiving this year?
27th.
Is it late?
Yep.
That'll help. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
Once the middle of November comes, people lose their.
Right. That's why we were really pushing to have it before Thanksgiving.
For sure.
Okay, we start out with just an outline of the presentation. So Michael, usually the RBC chair, typically has opened up and welcomed people and kind of handled the introductions and the overview of what we're going to talk about tonight. You comfortable doing that? Okay. Welcome and introductions. Are you okay if we have an inside picture of Jeffries? Okay.
I was just looking online for more pictures for the report, and there's one that almost looks exactly like that online, pretty readily available, so.
Some of the other energy companies did want inside facility pictures, and just want to make sure we're not. Appreciate that. I think we're reaching all of the secret turbines. Secret turbines. Okay, Michael, this again probably would be you. You would introduce the River Basin Council and talk a little bit about the different interest categories that are represented on the council. In this council, since it's a little smaller, we only had 6 of 8 interest categories represented. We didn't have anybody for local governments or one other category, which I'll draw on the blank on. Well, I'll think about it, but RBC members that are at the public meeting, and we hope y'all can come, would kind of stand up. You know, Michael, later, somebody to introduce yourself. Okay, and then typically Scott has gone and provided an overview of the planning process, so kind of a precursor to this Santee River Basin Council, you know, what occurred up to this point. And he reviews these slides going all the way back to the previous state water plan and talking about how the state is organized into 8 basins. The bottom-up approach, we've got a timeline here to kind of walk through work that's been done since the 2004 or the 98 plan, the 2004 plan, the modeling that began in 2014, PPAC, planning framework, that thing. Just the extension of the timeline over the last 3 years. It's this, culminating in our draft of the Santee River Basin Plan. Scott, we'll talk a little bit about the Planning Process Advisory Committee. And Brooke, this may be you this time.
It might be me this time.
Since you're a little more local. So,
Have the water planning people been coming to the different RBC public meetings?
the water SC members?
Yes.
Some of the water SC members are on RBCs. There's 3 or 4 of them. Outside of that, I know some of them attended virtually, listened in, but they haven't been routinely coming. But most of the RBCs have finished, obviously. So their overlap in water SC hasn't been significant. It's mainly first half of this year.
Okay. Right.
Introduction to what is a river basin plan? What are the key outcomes? What are the features? What's the planning horizon? We've added this slide because, especially in the PD, there was a lot of discussion from the public when we had the Q&A session at the end about water quality. A lot of concerns about water quality, especially in the PD, by a couple of members of the public that were there to offer a comment. So we were kind of introducing this slide to explain early in the process, early in the presentation, that we haven't focused on quality. People are welcome to make comment about quality issues, but we wanted to be clear that was not the objective of this initial planning process.
Their concerns were about mercury. Is that the key concern?
In the PD, I don't recall.
It was sludge issues up in Chesterfield County.
Biosolids application.
Yeah, and that took up a lot of time during our Q&A, and we, acknowledged it and recorded it, but just said that it wasn't part of our plan. And it's something that the yes watersheds group, what's his name group?
And that's the one.
Watershed.
There was any of the applications on biosolids? It was wrong.
Yeah, there was sludge concerns. So, yeah.
Okay.
We joined them to a group that worked on this. There were small trimming areas that were impacted, and it just was something outside of the scope of our plans. I mean, PD's huge too, so this is one area.
Review of the 4 different phases, the planning process, current status of all the river basin councils and the state water plan.
Can I ask something?
Yeah.
Should we address, since we have been on a time constraint and it has affected our plan, should we explain that in a slide that just explains why we were in a time constraint?
Yeah, I think whether it's Scott or Brooke or somebody else from DES that's talking about this, I think that's something that they would note and explain, that because of the governor's executive order, Santee was required to complete their year. There's both good and bad to that. One, that you're the last one to go. So, we worked out some of the kinks in the planning process and we were able to focus on the most important thing. But It also didn't necessarily allow you sufficient time to adequately deliberate, perhaps, but, you know, there'll be discussion about that. I don't know that we need a slide, but certainly probably verbalized.
Yeah, y'all did a good job there. I mean, being involved in several of these, we trimmed the fat where we needed to, and I think we still came up with a good plan.
Just a slide to be able to emphasize that all of this planning, has included a lot of stakeholder participation. So it's bottom-up planning rather than top-down planning. And we've got a lot of examples here of RBC meetings and technical surface water committee meetings, PPAC meetings, that type of stuff. Okay, then we get into plan highlights. And this is again where we'd like you all to kind of break this up and speak to certain sections, and I'll offer some suggestions. Michael, this might be back to you, or Alicia as the co-chair, you might decide to present this part, kind of introduce what we'll review. So we're going to go through demands, we'll talk about water availability assessment, modeling. We may or may not talk about the drought scenario, the synthetic drought scenario, that'll be up to you. And then we focus on water management strategies and recommendations, implementation. Before we get into that, it's valuable for y'all to talk about your vision statement and your goals, that kind of the overarching guide to your planning process. And then we jump right into demands. So we've got a map of ground and surface water locations, then summary table breaking it up by sector and groundwater versus surface water versus total, and a pie chart to accompany that. But let me back up. Michael, would you still want to be, or introducing everything, you turn it over to Scott or Brooke or DES? Do you want to pick it up again, or Alicia, do you want to handle these first couple slides before we get into?
I'm fine with doing that, unless you want to.
No, that'd be great.
Okay. So Alicia, I think you would start here. You would cover what we're going to review. You can talk about the vision and the goals. Then this is where we start to get into demands. You could continue on if you wanted to, and just say, the first thing we did was quantify current and future water demands. Here's the current demands, and you can highlight what you think is important here, or talk about the difference between groundwater and surface water. Point to the fact that most of the demands are thermoelectric. Much of that is returned to the system. You know, whatever you felt was important. Would you like to be comfortable talking about that, or would you like somebody else to?
I think I can do that.
Okay. This is an optional slide, and some of the councils, they've said, well, it's hard for people to understand what 1 billion gallons per day of water is, right? It's kind of esoteric if you don't work in the industry. So we've kind of given the standard Olympic sized swimming pool in certain basins. Sometimes we've shown the Gaffney peachoid.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if people in the lower part of the state are so much aware of that, but I mean, it's pretty iconic, right? That holds 1 million gallons. So sometimes we put that picture up there and say, this is what 1 million gallons.
House of Cards.
Yeah.
That's like the same, if you.
Yeah, that's it.
Like, it would show a slide from House of Cards. I love the football too. I love, a lot of times they use a football field as a, you know.
Yeah.
Size line.
And that's for area. We're talking about volume.
Right, we're talking about volume.
Yeah. So we've got an example of let's see,
That's. a good-
0.66 million gallons, which is 126 pools in one day to meet the public supply demand in the basin.
That's good. I
like
heard that. That's very.
Okay. Then on the low side of demands, we've associated that with water coming out of a garden hose. Aquaculture is 0.01 million gallons per day, and that's 15 gallons per minute, or what, 4 garden hoses running over a day. You think that's useful or not?
I think that minimizes it. The pools is a better example.
Yeah.
Well, what is, I'm sorry, guys, what is aquaculture?
Yeah, good point. Aquaculture is using water to grow fish, or I guess it could be shrimp or
I,
some type of,
when they say
something.
farm raised salmon, that's what we're talking about. I don't know if people know that. Is there
yeah,
a better?
that'd be something,
I'm with you.
Alicia, that you could say, here's our sectors, aquaculture, if you don't know what that means, is fish hatcheries.
Eel farm,
What was that?
the eel farms just downstream of here,
Eel farm, yeah.
Oh,
produce and export more eels in any other country in the world.
that's a cool one, that.
Used to.
So you like this slide? You want these examples or the peachoid? Any thoughts on how they
Whoever's
make
gonna
this more
talk about
relatable?
this just needs to tell people what aquaculture is.
Why that's relevant. I appreciate Sarah saying that, because I'm sitting there going, why do we have aquaculture there? But I get it, it's over here on our water.
It's on the
table, so somebody needs to make that connection.
Well, and also I think the point is that's the smallest versus the biggest, right? So the biggest is the pool, the smallest is these garden hoses that are run.
Do they still have the catfish farm going up Highway 6 toward
No,
Cross?
it's all getting developed.
It's been developed.
It's on its way, yeah.
I can't believe we only fill us 126.
Well, I was kind of surprised at that.
Get to work, at least.
That's
It's not, 26, that's not very many.
Yeah, I can do this, and I have I'll look at the examples that we've used with, some of our outreach, when we're trying to say how much, a milligram per liter is, or something like that. I've got some ideas.
That's an underwhelming.
Another good,
Like 2 or 3 board adjustments a week, like what's going on?
average household eats 300 gallons per day. How many households? You know, would it take?
Oh, I get the point, it's not, that's good. Okay. Stop before that.
Okay. There's a couple slides in here where we identify like key findings, and we've always kind of identified this as a key finding in all the plans to be able to compare current use to what the total permitted and registered amount is. Are we using close to the total permitted and registered amount? Typically, no, we're only using a fraction of that. So in this basin, they're currently using 517 million gallons per day of surface water. Most of that's thermoelectric. And what's been permitted registered is 3 times that, basically. That asterisk is something that the lower Savannah Salcatchee felt it's important to add, because they thought that people might feel that, well, permitted registered is analogous to water availability. If they permitted and registered that amount, that means that's how much is available within your state. As we've seen, when we ran the permitted registered scenario, we see shortages. So there's not always that much water available. So we've added that asterisk and note to make sure people understand. They're not the same. Permit registered doesn't mean how much water is available necessarily all the time. Okay, here is an intro to our future demand projections. We've been talking about current use demands in this instance. The fact that we looked at a 50-year planning horizon, and we've done projections for all the different water use sectors. And one of the things that's important to point out on this slide is the big drop in future demands because of the anticipated closures of the 2 thermoelectric facilities. You still comfortable talking through this part of it too, Alicia?
I think so.
Why are we jumping to high demand instead of moderate?
Typically, we've not talked about all the scenarios just because it's a lot of data and it's a little overwhelming for them. So we've kind of simplified it, just talking about current and then the high demand scenario. And we've emphasized that we use the high demand scenario, which is conservative, as our planning scenario. We base decisions on it to be conservative. It's okay to mention the moderate, but I think we felt like we would overwhelm them by showing too many graphs and charts that have all these different scenarios.
And you shared the high demand and all the other ones? of the basins.
Yes.
I guess really in this one, though, Jason, when I look at that, and so I am guessing we are the only basin that by 2070 in a better position than we are today. And I can't imagine there's any other basins where the graph looks like this, right?
The thermoelectric being non-consumptive is kind of a little misleading. Correct. And the location of the thermoelectric withdrawals and returns.
The location,
is
and I'm
important.
saying, well, if I look at the graph and I don't know any of that, all I'm gonna take home is that we're in a much better position in 2070 than we are today.
Right.
So maybe there needs to be an asterisk or something that explains that.
I think it'd be important to say that while there's the anticipated closures of these two thermoelectric stations, their location in the basin, on the very down, you know, how you say it, one's lower on the Cooper River, one's lower down on the Santee River, right? Most of the withdrawals are upstream of those. Right. So if you ignore the thermoelectric in this, you do see that throughout the basin, there will be increasing demand from.
Would it be useful to show, to pull that out to this particular slide? I guess the only reason I say that is I'm picturing myself in the audience, concerned stakeholder. I don't know anything, all of the detail, but all I see there is a pretty big drop over what we're using today. So maybe just make it very clear who we're speaking to.
Yeah. Alicia, if you're speaking to this, would you want a map to accompany this, maybe on the next slide? Not necessarily this model diagram, but maybe an actual map that shows the location of the two thermoelectric stations that are closing, and you use that as a way to say these are downstream of the most existing withdrawals.
Yeah, I would want that and something else to make sure that I accurately explain what's going on there, bullet point or
Like
somewhere.
a little asterisk for non-consumptive, something kind of in your brain.
Right.
Yeah.
Even though non-consumptive, we utilize today. And so I'm not sure that saying non-consumptive tells the story because the graph still, okay, right, I get it, we're not drinking it, we're evaporating. But in 2070, that water should still be there and when it's not.
Well, it's not even evaporating, it just goes back to the.
What if you did two graphs? Would y'all be happy, could you stack the graphs? Would that be helpful?
We could have a separate slide.
You could have a graph, I need to have a graph, maybe like, this is this, but then, you know, like,
And I may be making a bigger.
I understand what you're saying, though, from a labor-
Makes
people are gonna be super confused by the huge.
I would do now, if I was gonna slide about anything, if you were presenting today's space, 2070, and I would say, oh, it's lower.
Right.
Why are we sitting here? That's just how I would.
So if you took the thermoelectric off of the
That would be
secondary
maybe.
plot, then you would really lose impact because, yeah, and then that's a lot why we've talked about water use outside of, you know.
Well, thermoelectric too. That's gotta be replaced by something, because every time we hit a switch, we expect it to come on. So maybe you take that off and just explain we didn't use it because.
Do we know what will replace thermoelectric power?
Mostly gonna be more water efficient equipment. The coal-fired generation uses a lot of water, and the air rigs and the coal combustion residual rigs that are out there, even the wastewater rigs, are all gonna make sure we're never gonna build another coal plant in the United States.
Probably build natural gas, fire plants, and nuclear, that's all that's left.
Yeah.
Given all that, if it's easier, you did that, so not that at least you can talk about it, but if that's your business, that's related to that, it'd be easier for you to talk about this.
Yeah,
Yeah, you're extremely talented.
no,
Fantastic. Maybe that's his.
I was hoping you might talk about the modeling, and we can get into a whole lot of details. Because we get into discussion on fish passes, you'll lose people really quick.
Yeah.
So you'll have to carefully talk about the results and the key findings. So it may make sense if you want to, like, after this slide, maybe Alicia turns it back over to you and you talk about the difference in demands because of retiring power facilities.
Yeah.
Just do the time to do it next time. It's not to break it up anyway, you'll already have.
You know, I'm so boring, you know, like.
Besides for the audience.
That gives her a chance to change her outfit. You can put a different dress on it. You know? Yeah, I hope you're wearing all couture outfits for this. I've got, we're gonna be ideas for that for you. Yeah, some fundraising.
Just one thought, if you do mention consumptive, non-consumptive, sometimes that's a hard concept for people to understand as
Normal
well.
people don't know what that means.
Right, so I'm almost hesitant to not bring it up because it raises questions like, what's non-consumptive? And you could explain it, but even then, sometimes it doesn't sink in.
But I can talk about it in context of cooling and how
Right,
cooling water gets passed back to the water body.
yeah, that might be a better way.
Yeah.
Rather than bringing in a term, you could just explain what happened.
Right.
The water's withdrawn, used to cool, and the majority of it is returned very close to where it's pulled from the system.
You don't measure what you're returning, you just measure what you're taking out.
Well, they sort of measure what they're returning.
But that graph doesn't.
No, that one doesn't.
Oh, no, that one doesn't.
Right.
We do have the consumption, or, yeah, the graphs with consumption, not just withdrawal. We want to include those.
We can practice it and Michael can explain it to me and I'll tell him if I understood it and then we'll be good, then we'll be ready.
Okay.
I mean, well, that's a question. Should we change the graph to be consumption instead of withdrawal and then that reduces confusion, or is that misleading? What would be best for the audience?
What's the story you want to say? I think that's the problem I have with this picture. What's the story you want to say? The audience ain't gonna have any of the backstory that we're talking about. They're not even, a lot of them won't maybe turn you.
I mean, the simplest story that you want to tell these demand projections is that we expect for the most part, in most sectors, to be needing more water. In this instance, it's a little unique because thermoelectric requirements. But if you ignore that, we expect public supply and manufacturing to be using, we've got the numbers on the left side of the screen there, 149 million gallons per day more 50 years from now. That's kind of the simple story we want to tell here.
Steady increase up and to the right. And you have to explain the thermal.
Right. And that, I mean, that's just probably gonna be as simple as saying that the new resources we plan to bring online and it's more water efficient. And that's not a hard thing to, I don't think that's a hard thing to. I mean, you might, you know, at some point you may want to say too that maybe this is early on, but you are downstream of 3 other river basins, right? And their demand projections also impact how much water flows into the Santee. And while you have some planned retirements or high water withdrawals in the Santee, there's planned expansion or new plants in the Broad River Basin, for example. Get into that level of detail, but it might be worth explaining.
I think what hit home with me during this brief discussion, if I was in the audience, I would take home with me, is that this large thermal drop you're seeing due to efficient equipment will bring that down. That is downstream of several key water suppliers and intakes. So where that water is being withdrawn is outside of the picture that we're most concerned about. Like that's a good.
Yep. Basically, those withdrawals weren't really impacting any of the upstream withdrawals, which is the majority of the surface water users in the basin.
That's right. And they're the last straws on the system.
Exactly. That's a good way to put it. Last straw, unless they're saying.
Yeah, they go the last straw.
Hickson, did you have your hand up? A comment to make?
Yeah, I just have a question. You know, I'm sure you guys ran the model with the potential continuation of thermoelectric usage, and I don't think that would be. I think we're fine to not include that. I understand we don't include every scenario, but maybe my colleague here at Santee Cooper could talk a little bit just to help me out selfishly with the opening of the planned Kennedy's plant. Is there any water consumption involved with Kennedy's?
Yeah, Hickson, there will be, that's on the Edisto though, so it's not something we'll be directly addressing here.
Okay, good deal. Just wanted to make sure.
You might want to talk a little bit to Michael about the high demand scenario and what it represents, and that it's a conservative scenario used for planning. It's not a, if you remember back to the discussion, the presentation Scott gave, it's not a forecast, it's a projection.
Right.
And a projection is, suitable for planning, but we're not trying to estimate necessarily. We're trying to develop projections of what it could be, and we use aggressive assumptions for economic growth, population increase, a drier climate that might result in increased demand for irrigation.
Yeah. So it's the reasonable worst case.
Right.
It's kind of
Exactly.
what we're trying to get at.
This is groundwater and surface water. So here we're showing the water use sectors. And this one just shows the difference between groundwater and surface water. Surface water, again, that decrease because of the closed thermoelectric and groundwater, a 30% increase.
We just wondering if that slide really helps at all, or this just get eliminated.
That slide really doesn't make any sense because the other one either, because we're talking withdrawals, but yet we're putting a lot of that back. So I just don't think the slide is representative of what's happening.
Yeah, I could see that. This slide doesn't give you any information about how much groundwater versus surface water is used. The intent of this was to say, by the way, most of this is surface water. You can see that groundwater is only a fraction of that, but we do expect groundwater use to increase. I think that was the intent of this one.
Yeah.
Just in case somebody's interested in groundwater, they're looking at this slide saying, well, how much of that is groundwater? I don't know. That's what the intent of this one was.
I know that both of those slides, this one and the other one, where the demand scenarios in yellow on the other one, that huge drop off, that ought to be tempered by the amount of water that goes back. Everything else doesn't go back.
And my water goes back on.
But
I don't even need a permit.
Yeah.
100% back.
I understand what you mean, you're saying, but this is, power consumption is totally different.
So we've had that discussion actually in
It is confusing.
other RBCs. Yeah.
I think that's gonna be hard to explain.
Yeah.
Particularly because we're gonna show shortages in some scenarios later. That's right. I've tuned out. If I'm in the audience here worried about water, I feel like I would tune out when I saw that personally, because I'm like, well, the problem worse today than it's gonna be.
Or it just have another line on there that differentiates withdrawal from what goes back. Have another line on there that shows, and then the delta between those two is what's actually used.
I mean, we could do what you suggested originally, is make thermoelectric just the net use, which might simplify things a little bit, but we've offered that option up in other RBCs, and some of the public water supplier folks said just what Alan did, like, well, a lot of my water gets back too, so you're not giving me credit for returning water, but you're giving it to the thermoelectric users, the energy folks. There's good and bad about different ways to show it.
This needs to be explained.
Yeah. I'm confident, Michael, you can explain.
You got this, Michael.
But we could maybe we'll do a second graph that just has the net use or some version of that might be useful or useful to supplement this one perhaps, or maybe, I don't know, we could put a dotted line on here that shows well, this is a stacked chart though, so everything's cumulative.
Well, when he talks about this, people, they might not understand what just labeled thermoelectric, right? And then when you get to the part, is the next one the map with the different, like you could say, these thermoelectric plants are not gonna be here in blah, 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 which is why that.
Yes. I think we'll introduce a map right after this slide.
Okay.
Up
So that
top
really
side
helped
that
me.
Show
Like,
where they
okay,
are.
Here are these plants and they're closing or shutting down their road irrigation. But it also, to somebody's point, it's gonna be replaced by something that's more use but less.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit of an unknown, but a better unknown.
Okay.
Right?
One thing you could do, John, go to the next slide, please, is have, you know, once he's talked through that pretty complicated slide, have, you know, the surface water, you know, that slide is surface water, and it's a 57% decrease in surface water. And then have just a bullet come in that the groundwater is gonna be a net increase of 30%. And that way you are covering both. You're kind of summarizing the surface water and then also making a quick bullet point to the groundwater, rather than now creating a stacked slide of two different resources, one of which we're already still confused about how we're gonna communicate.
Yeah, no, that's a good point too, because I think we hit home the fact on this slide that groundwater is only 30 MGD and surface water's 6 times that, or whatever that is.
I'm with you. We should bring it up. Yeah, I just don't know, maybe it's some slide.
Okay.
Mike, I guess to your point, and maybe I was getting hung up on this too, that water needs to be available. We're not talking about a net. We're talking about water that needs to be available for whatever process, drinking water or power. It's gotta be available, so we gotta have 800, regardless of what we put back. Right, I agree. So this is water that has to be available. And so I agree with you. It could be confusing because it's not about the net negative. It's about, I have to have that water available today, right now.
Right.
You're not.
Regardless of return,
Yeah.
right? Regardless of return. But you're still gonna have to discuss that. Slow.
Okay.
I'm confident, Mike.
Okay. So getting the beer after this one for sure. This will get me.
Oh, you got it.
And I think the point here is, again, not to get into a lot of detail, but to say that in all the river basins, including the Santee, we've had a tool, SWAM model, to evaluate current use and future use based on historical hydrologic conditions. We use these to evaluate different planning scenarios, including the current use scenario, the high demand scenario, help identify where there might be shortages in the system, where there's risk, and help us with identifying potential water management strategies, something to that extent. And then you kind of just jump in, at least this is how we've done it before, you know, what are the key findings, what are the bullet points? And open to your suggestions here. There's a lot of text here. We can make each one of these pop up, you know, one by one, so you're only talking about one at a time, but you'll have to kind of carefully craft what the message is here. Maybe this is too much detail too, about, you know, modeling suggests 2 public supply users, 2 ag users, 2 golf courses may experience shear shortages. You might want to simplify this a little bit.
Yeah, that might not be a bad thing. And I think clarifying these shortages are, you know, under drought conditions, right? You know, drought of record conditions. And not that term necessarily is going to mean anything much, but I can bring up the 2007, 2008 drought as, you know, really what's driving the modeled risk for shortages, but maybe explicitly stating it's drought conditions that we're concerned about somewhere might be helpful. Right.
Well, in the current use scenario you're referring to is the one that is more challenging. Correct?
It is, and because those withdrawals are all the way at the bottom of the basin, what the model's shown right now is actually, and with the tweaks John talked about earlier, we can avoid model shortages for our 2 water plants under the current use because they're upstream of those withdrawals, the thermoelectric withdrawals.
What if we just included the first 2 bullets eliminated bullet 3 and 4, but then added a new bullet 3 to get at Michael's point about the way that the lakes are managed to mitigate shortages in their contingency plan.
Well, I don't like, why are we putting bullet number 1 first if we're not? Unless there was a drought or more serious conditions. It's making us look like the first thing we're saying is food shortage. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, it's saying risk of shortage, it's not that there are shortages. And so you're basically covering current use, which is the no growth. And then the second bullet is now moderate and high demand assumptions. So you're kind of going from current to now projection. So the progression of bullets makes sense. I promise.
Let me think about a couple other options to simplify this for you, Michael, and send it to you. I think I could reduce the wording significantly, but it'll be placeholders for you to basically get the message across that.
Right.
We have experienced issues in the past during the 2007, 2008 drought. Lake levels dropped to near critical levels. Santee Cooper has contingency plans in place. Modeling of the future conditions suggests that with increased demands upstream, there is risk of shortages, that we would be needing to implement these contingency plans. This speaks to the need for, across the board conservation, not only in Santee, but in the upstream basins to help avoid this type of issue in the future if droughts get worse, things like that.
Right.
Just keep it kind of high level.
For sure.
Yeah, please. Hickson, you have a comment?
No comment. Just going to say I have to duck off to meet with some folks, but I appreciate everybody.
Great. Well, no, thank you for your input. Appreciate it.
Why don't you just show the map where you have the users on there and just highlight the ones? You don't have to say their name, but you could say golf course, or ag. I just think sometimes too much text overwhelms people, particularly if it's technical.
Yep.
So Michael's saying those bullet points instead of having them listed, making a graphic to just illustrate it better.
Yeah, we could do that. We could maybe show the model schematic and just kind of put a shaded circle around users that potentially experience shortages, but I don't know, Michael, then we're calling out the regional water systems specifically.
Is this publicly available though? Isn't this publicly available for them to comment on?
Yeah.
Like your models?
Yeah, I mean, it's documented in chapter 5.
One thing too, John, that might be, to Gwen's point, that might be helpful to set the context for everybody would be one of the, and I could provide you the graphic, but one of the overall watershed maps to drive home the point that we're at the mercy of what's upstream of us to some extent too. That we have 3 other basins whose management impacts what we're able to do.
Yeah, okay, we can add that one. We've got that map available, so. Okay, we'll send you some alternate key findings here then to consider that are a little more condensed into this point. We did have 2 slides about that extended drought scenario that we ran, where we repeated the 2007, 2008 drought just to see if lake levels are able to recover or there was a continual decline. And, we saw that actually because of the high precipitation that occurred in early 2008, which then gets repeated, the lakes filled back up. So I'm not sure it's worth showing this, talking about this. It gets into a little more detail than I think may be necessary. So I'd recommend not talking about it, but
I think that's fine, because the severity of it somewhat depends on exactly what time frame you pick, and I don't know how valuable that's going to be to the general public.
Right. And then it raises the point too that John Grego mentioned, like, well, what if you just ran 2008 instead of 2007, 2008? You did it repeating.
Yeah.
Would you see the same thing or would you see a drop? And out of curiosity, I actually did rerun that one and there is enough water and it fills back up. Which I was a little surprised because I thought maybe there wouldn't be enough, but in this case there was. But then you could start playing the different months and you could cut off the months where there was high flow and run that and you would see an issue. So it all depends on the particular hydroelectric trace that you select.
But even in an unregulated, undammed basin like the Edisto during the worst multi-year drought on record, river reached flood stage several times. It was still during drought.
Yeah.
But still filled back up. So it's a little bit weird to look at it that way. Of course, the resource is going to have relief even during drought, and at the end of the drought, it's going to return back to normal conditions. Kind of goes without saying, right? I mean, you're not going to have a perpetual shortage.
Okay, so we won't include those. All right, and then there's some groundwater key findings. George, do you think these are reasonable key findings for this basin?
I would show them a Queen Ranch.
Give you the map, you would show green.
We don't even have any wells in the basin in the Crowd Ranch really, except for the upper portion. Yeah.
Where's that map that you have with the different aquifers that goes this way? Those color lines.
The cross section.
That's a good one because you can see the aquifers in the different parts of the state, I feel like. And down here. You remember that one?
Yeah, we can.
I feel like it's a little bit repetitive, especially like if you say it's, oh, not you, I'm sorry, I was reading the bullet point. Maybe something that's different for, because the cross branch and Coon Branch recharge is adequate, like up dip. We don't have a ton of knowledge as it gets farther down dip, especially because the McLean branch turns into the Charleston aquifer. So it might be helpful to mention the Charleston aquifer since it's the heaviest used, not pointing out everybody, but that, there have been substantial declines since pre-development and they've been managed or, and then you've got a plot of the Gordon right there. We don't ever really even talk about the Gordon, so I would just hand off to maybe.
And what do we need? Is there any value in listing the aquifer? Additional monitoring was needed to understand how.
Yeah, I mean-
it may impact aquifer levels, period.
Yeah, I mean, especially since we're losing some of our Charleston ones. Did I think about it for a second? I didn't,
Yeah, you can think about it.
I just like the cross section because then people realize that it sounds stupid. They see that an aquifer, they see what it is. That map, there was something on the news the other day. They asked people what an aquifer was. Half the people didn't know what an aquifer was. Sure. Maybe that's what I saw. I was like, okay, and I think a long time ago, Brooke had to explain to me what, I'm the one who raised my hand last year and said, can you tell me? And I was asking, publicly asking that question. So, I mean, I love the cross, I'm not saying maybe, I love the cross section map because it shows the depths of the different aquifers and how they range across either the state or our basin. I can't remember.
I mean, if you're going that way, then it could emphasize that, we have several different aquifers available for
Yes,
use
and
within
it
our basins.
Yes.
Instead of showing a hydrograph, but I definitely think showing a snapshot of our potentiometric map is useful because that's, how the data are used to make decisions on supply and make decisions on changes in groundwater storage. So
Potentiometric is the potential for use.
the potentiometric, it's an inferred, it's a surface, it's an imaginary surface of water pressure. All the wells that are completed in a single aquifer are measured at a relatively short period of time. And the potentiometric surface is the amount of pressure that the water rises within these wells so that you can create a contour map of the aquifer across a large regional area. So it's a contour map. So, yeah, so like looking at that contour map up there with the concentric cones right there, that's not a mountain. It's a hole. I think that would be maybe helpful if they're saying that, if we could emphasize that there are several aquifers that are available for use. And then that that they are relatively stable basin wide, and then emphasizing this, groundwater and surface water, is already in use. But maybe, something different in that.
Well, who's gonna talk about this slide?
Yeah, so Alan, I was wondering if you would be willing, since you're a groundwater user, to pick up groundwater key findings and then tailor that into water management strategies. Continue talking about that.
And I guess we'll probably get another chance to edit, but I would also suggest that last bullet, could just at the bottom to include strategies should be explored to meet the growing demand, including water recycling, parentheses, reading. So that was one of our big.
So, yeah, that's maybe a good segue for you to this next slide here.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, that's something.
So, yeah, Alan, if you're willing, then I might ask for, might email this to Brooke and say, Brooke, what would you suggest? We simplify this, and I'd let you have the final say since you're speaking to it. That's the one you want to include.
And I'll be real concise. I don't like, there's too much text up
We have
there.
that in common.
Yeah, for up there already.
Pictures are not big enough.
Yeah, and again, for all this, I encourage each RBC member to kind of tell their own story. So, Alan, you're welcome to talk about what you think is important here. Give a high level overview of groundwater in the basin, but I think people can relate to it if you say Mount Pleasant water relies on, water from whatever, and we have aquifer storage and recovery, and, you're welcome to talk about whatever you want to here. As long as you're not saying something that the rest of the RC doesn't agree with. Your comments.
Have security with you in the parking lot.
Okay.
Clear bag policy.
So Alan, the intent here is to say, part of the RBC deliberations was to discuss water management strategies. What are water management, what are they? And say, here's a slide of different demand side strategies. These are strategies that reduce the amount of water that we use, reduce the amount of water that's lost, makes water use more efficient, and you can give a couple examples, maybe you talk about use of recycled water, public education, conservation pricing structures. You've got, Mount Pleasant has a conservation price, but touch on just a few of them.
Should that just be water management strategies?
Probably, yeah, let's just do water management strategy because we don't have a separate one for groundwater. Okay. All right, then we get into recommendations. And we've got too many recommendations to go through all of them. So what we've typically been doing is just highlighting a few of them that are understandable and that we think are the most important, just to give as examples within each category. So that's where I'm looking for your feedback. Which ones do you think are most important, are relatable, understandable, are good representative of that category's recommendations? So this is technical recommendations, technical and program recommendations, which you shouldn't have a whole lot of. But we've highlighted 3 here that y'all agreed to. These 3 that you want to highlight, you want to apply it and only talk about 2 of them. The first one's kind of nice because it gives you the opportunity to say, we did do surface water modeling. The intent was to do groundwater modeling. However, the model is still being developed. Future planning phases, we will work with the USGS and DES to apply that model and focus on groundwater availability.
Let's see. So what we had in here was support continued efforts to maintain the stream flow gauges, future climate climate projections in the modeling analysis. Surface water quality. Onward site, land use changes. And then the state water plan could include reuse recycled water as a source of water for South Carolina. And DES should implement regulations supports use that support water resilience in South Carolina.
And maybe that's one you want to highlight, especially Alan, if you're continuing on and speaking to this.
I would agree that whether I'm speaking to this slide or someone else, to me, that's probably one of my biggest interests. I feel like
Yeah.
that needs to be a bullet.
Which one?
Recycled water.
Recycle, reuse.
Recycle.
That's why I said.
That's the way brown, gray, the different colors of cloth. Chartreuse, whatever color they come in,
That way it keeps coming up.
whatever you're gonna do with them.
That's all.
Marketing, you're all about touch. Pantone chart.
I do think that should be one. And we may have two slides that show our recommendations, but at least you can get that.
Do you want to change that instead of the middle one? The
Yeah, I was
future
gonna say maybe get rid of the middle one.
analysis?
but,
I wanna do the chart that shows the different colors of buckets. That's
We have a breakout session.
This is how we did it. That water. Water can make you take. Yeah, the positive, like we got lost. She was like, we agree. We agree on anything. Sounds terrible.
Smart stuff.
I did, but.
Okay. Alan, if you're comfortable talking to this slide, then I think maybe you could transition it to somebody else to do the remaining recommendation slides. Anybody else want to volunteer?
Probably.
You're not gonna be there. Jason,
Huh?
you have any interest?
Depends what it slides.
Well, so planning process, which, those are kind of, I call them softer recommendations, but they're important. You can talk about those, and here we just listed 3. There's other ones that you can highlight. And then policy, legislative, regulatory type recommendations, and this would be your opportunity to talk about mean versus median, if we included that as a recommendation.
Definitely got for this thing.
Yeah.
Where would you propose we bring that up to in the slides? If we were to discuss that.
Where do you want to confuse the audience tonight?
It's waiting to say that. Just for the record, I think reasonable use is gonna, it's like this, nobody in the audience has a clue as to what we're talking about.
It is, no, honestly, it is. And in
It's
fact,
been such a loaded topic that we're just trying to get general consensus behind, even though very few people know what we're even talking about. But, I don't mind giving the slides, and I probably will not mention median and mean for the sake of confusing everybody. But as long as that comes up in the 2-page technical summary of the River Basin Council, I won't bring it up in this meeting.
Yeah, that's perfect.
okay.
Do you want me to read off what our recommendations were to see if they were, if that's what we want?
Sure. Yeah, maybe there's another one we can use in place of reasonable use, because Jason's right, that's a hard concept.
All right,
Let's give an example of reasonable use. Like, is that, watering your grass after 7 o'clock?
No, that's not what we do.
I mean, what is reasonable use?
Has to do with the amount of the registration or permit that's been requested and reserved versus the amount of that's being utilized. But if you look at the entire reasonable use clause in the law and the regulation, there's a whole lot else underneath that bag of worms.
Might be better just to avoid it here.
Okay, sounds like.
Alicia, you're gonna read
More
it.
complicated.
all right, improve the current laws that allow for regulation of water use so they are enforceable and effective.
Yeah, that one's there.
Sorry. State and local government should continue to develop, review, update, adopt, and enforce laws, regulations, policies, and or ordinances that improve the management of stormwater runoff, encourage infiltration, minimize stream bank erosion, and reduce sedimentation and protect water resources.
Slide in itself.
The review periods for Yeah. The legislature should approve and adopt the state water plan and subsequent updates. We're right, they can read them. The Surface Water Withdrawal Permitting Use and Reporting Act should be amended to require all surface water withdrawals over 3 million gallons a month be subject to permit requirements and review. Then there's funding. Dirty up thing. There's like a grant program, the funding. There's several funding things on here, and then safe yield. The safe yield definition using median statistics. All permits and registrations requesting volumes above safe yield should be required to develop and submit to DES, realistic contingency and or conservation capabilities, et cetera, et cetera. That's definitely one, but that's DES should require high use industrial water users purchasing from a municipal supply to report their monthly water usage. Well, do you think people are gonna come and concerned about data centers? Are we gonna get a lot of comments or that? Because it's been in the paper or in the news a lot. And so.
That's what Al's gonna put on his Instagram.
Yeah. Is that gonna be the biosolids of our meeting? I don't know.
It just all depends. You never know. I mean, at the Lower Savannah Stock Hatch meeting, there was 35 people there and we opened it up for comment. Crickets. Nobody made any comments. But
It was in the papers very recently.
Like yesterday.
Crazy.
You might go back one slide, there's a good chance that will be the study.
I think we're good.
Yeah,
so
Okay, go for it.
Were you trying to just, for these slides on our recommendations, were you trying to just pick 3 or 4 that were high?
So
Just
just
like
that,
a concern.
that are understandable, that we don't have to dive into too much detail to explain.
Gotcha.
That might be good representative ones. So maybe the one about requiring high water users that purchase water from the utility to report.
That would there, that would go.
Because that's the data center issue.
Data center. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Starting that from some earlier stories, all the way back when, it said that they were reporting. Some whole market numbers.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
See that I can use.
We're almost done.
We're almost done. Okay, now
What do you think, Jason? Are you okay talking about that one or?
I would rather anybody else talk about it.
Is that true?
The circuit board apart.
Why?
I think the challenge is all of these are loaded.
Well, why don't you put the surface water on my slide now? It's the permittal line. I'm totally comfortable talking about that. If Jason has hesitation.
You mean the ground and surface water?
Yeah.
Or
Is that
the,
the one you're talking about?
no, I mean,
You're talking about permanent line, that one?
yeah, permanent line. I mean, the reasonable use is starting to look like a real preferable. You guys are making me just, I want to
Is
just
it
keep
because
reasonable
nobody
use.
knows what reasonable use is?
Exactly.
That's their problem, but they don't understand. It sounds reasonable.
You could simplify it too and just have 2 examples and say, you know, we really got into the weeds and have a lot of recommendations focused on, and you could just mention the topic, but not talk about the recommendations. I'm not trying to force you to highlight 3 by any means, but.
Well, if we do think people are gonna bring up data centers, there probably should be something on there that would apply to that. Would you agree?
I'm not going to speak to that.
Oh, we also had in here, water users should continue to identify partnerships and alternative sources, including interconnections. What?
Say that again?
Water users should continue to identify partnerships and alternative sources, including interconnections to build resilience and ensure adequate quantity of water.
I mean, that's when
Alan's volunteer to just continue to present all of it. Right, it's really don't need me. I think Alan,
I understand your reticence.
and I'm not ready to explain my reticence.
I'm wrong.
Alan, you want to do all the recommendations?
I'm glad to, unless someone would like, someone else.
I give my limelight and this, it's your turn.
It's my turn.
I don't remember you did doing any the presentation in yet.
It's been.
So Alan, if you gave this set of slides to, you would be comfortable talking about the one where the RC suggests that high water users that purchase from a utility also report their use?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Transparency.
If I read that.
I didn't know you had so many reservations until today.
Video concerned with every single one of these things. I think somebody like Alan that can breeze over these in a confident way without getting muddled in the details is the right person to present
So
on.
it's not that you disagree, that it's your concern about presenting and being asked questions that you're hang up.
I think everybody knows me well enough to know that's not my problem. I think Alan's got this.
I'm concerned about your support for everything.
You're gonna get a 3, you're gonna get a 1 or 2 out of me, so don't worry. Or maybe a 3, but at least probably a 2.
I figured you were a 2.
Let's focus on this.
It's a personality.
Alan has this.
Okay.
Is that just, are you having a bad day or?
Yeah, I got up on the wrong side of the bed. Let's move on.
Okay. You want me to ask more questions?
Or Jason, more.
This interview is over.
I bet you I'll figure these ones out. We'll handle these.
I know that John is going, his council was very different about 7 months ago than it is this month.
Wheels are coming off here in the last.
Support me. That's what we're doing. Okay.
So Alan, I'll send you your set of slides. Decide, let's skip this one. We've got too many recommendations. Let's focus on these 5 and 6 rather than these 9 or
Mike
whatever.
brings up a good point. Oh, Lou, you probably should have a team meeting ahead of this, whoever is presenting, just quickly.
Yeah.
That-
Definitely.
that we do.
We've done that in every other
Yeah, let's do
RBD, so we'll do a
Day
prep
before,
meeting.
2 days ahead, let's get.
My birthday week is
Yeah.
going to hell.
Okay, the last 2 slides are basically,
This will be a fun night.
last 2 slides are basically introducing the fact that we developed an implementation plan. We've got 5 objectives. Within those are different actions and strategies the RBC intends to take in the coming years as planning continues. And that's about all you need to say. Too many actions and strategies to dive into them, so you usually just focus on the overarching objectives. Michael, I don't know. Michael, would you be comfortable if he turns it back to you to wrap it up then? So you have this slide and then this slide, which sometimes the RBCs have this in there, sometimes they don't. I think like the Saluda was the first to say, we need something to wrap this up and say, here's a call to action. You know, they've got actions and strategies that require participation and assistance from water users, state, federal agencies, conservation groups. You know, we're going to be looking to all of you in the future to help us with this. I thought it was a good idea. I kind of like that message to wrap things up. Yeah.
I get,
Okay.
get rid of Georgia.
Oh, yeah, you guys don't need Georgia. If the-
Welcoming them.
That was
That's the lowest the acronym was.
Okay, then we have a couple slides that I can talk to about submitting comments on the draft plan. That explain what they do, who they mail them to, when they're due by. We'll have an updated QR code that they can link to the planning page that has the posted draft plan, executive summary, and the 2-page summary sheet. And then we open it up to Q&A. That's it.
We have a comment, John Greco, said it's worth referencing the sort of 2007, 2008 drought somewhere in the presentations as the impact of the lakes made such an impression on the general public.
Yeah, I think there's an opportunity for Michael to talk about that too.
I'm gonna have to talk about that to provide some context about the model results.
Okay. And if you want us to show like a lake level graph or something where you can show the dip, if you want, let us know.
Yes.
You have that you need for.
Yeah, that might be helpful. I can't think of anything I've got off the top of my head, but it can be hard to put together.
I do think it would be helpful to let everybody know that what we're seeing in the model resembles closely what we actually saw. So it's a little bit of a surprise, right?
Yeah, I think that's vital, that the model's reflective of the experience that we've already had during an extreme drought. A lot of times we'll do water models for a municipality that are all over the board, and we never know they're right until you have an extreme event. You think they are, but you don't know. We've had an extreme event. We know these models are fairly accurate.
Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So if the goal is like public participation, is there will people be open to making a virtual meeting? To allow, I mean, from 6 to 8 at night, I doubt someone from like Richland County may want to drive down here. Is there a reason it's not?
Because it's supposed to be interactive.
You can moderate those. I mean, you can moderate that with having people raise hands, teams and ask questions that way, if you wanted to do it. It just might allow people to hear it more than just. Well, I thought other public meetings, I guess have we been able to see that before? Other public meetings, all the. It was water to see, I guess, that we were watching. Okay, I was thinking they were.
And generally speaking, I mean, it's one thing to have it live streamed, but it's a whole nother to interact live because it robs the interactive experience from those that actually win. It's also just a lot harder to set up and prepare for.
We could record it and have the recording available.
Yeah.
At least.
We haven't even done that in the past, actually. No, I don't think we have. We could record it. We had the same discussion for the Saluda and we ended up not doing a recording or virtual. Some of the same reasons we're talking about.
I'm not opposed to live streaming, no interaction with live streaming. However, I think if we're gonna live stream, we need to have door prizes or some incentive so that people want to come. What I've seen with our town meetings is if you do live streaming, it's easier to sit on the couch and some people won't come. Now, to Gwen's point, some people might not be able to come, so we want to capture them. But if we could put a door prize or something that incentivizes, I don't know. I think there is some value to seeing someone. But this is a long ways up. I mean, it's gonna be an hour and 20 minutes of my life to drive to it. So somebody in Mount Pleasant will likely say, I'm not driving up there.
Well,
Not to be too pessimistic either, but we have limited time to address any comments.
Yeah.
Whatever comes out of this, we want some input, but we might not want all the input.
And I'm telling you, if we put a letter to the editor, that the RBC will need to discuss issues and here's the meeting date or something like that. We may get 50 people, such a debate or something. I wouldn't want to tie those two together. But, people pick up on what we're doing and it may become a focal point.
I'm all about getting the word out. I just don't think the 8th and final RBC is the time that we do it differently as far as public meeting.
Yeah, it does create a challenge. In fact, I don't know that I feel comfortable seeing such being responsible for setting up the virtual space and trying to manage that. DES has been doing that for most of the water SC meetings and they have staff that can do it and set it up, but I don't know if they're gonna want to commit those staff and their resources to be able to do that night. They'd have to weigh in on that. And Scott, are you still on?
John, he's kind of.
Hey, John,
Just moving
John,
back.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Is the request for a live stream or for a virtual type meeting?
Both. I mean, if it's a virtual meeting, same thing as being live streamed, I guess.
And I can inquire about it, but I can't make any promises right now.
Okay.
Stream you can watch, but you can't interact. Virtual, you're talking about the Zoom or group meeting, come to meeting or whatever,
Question.
Yeah.
that's when you can raise your hand and ask questions. Live stream is just like, oh, I'm gonna watch it. Like my son's wedding is live stream. Nobody gets to say we object at this point.
I'm a little nervous just because of what happened in the PD during one of the RGC meetings to the live stream public meeting. They got hijacked by some bad actors and they had to shut the meeting down.
The whole point of a public meeting is anybody that participates is coming and they're on record for showing up, they're signing the roster.
Right.
You get people that dial in under some anonymous
say really
number,
loud.
they don't announce who they
Well,
are.
that's true.
They,
They say anything.
we have that, even on the drought committee, we have people that will call in and not acknowledge who they are. And if you're gonna participate, you're gonna participate.
Yeah, I agree. So the preference would be not to do it that way.
Practically speaking, too, that complicates setup and trying to make sure people have network access. And I
Right.
think there's another event going on in our auditorium during the daytime that day, so we're gonna have a limited window available as it is. So
Okay.
I'd rather we get to do that from a practical perspective.
I agree. Okay,
Maybe next week.
all right, that's all we had to cover today.
So, John, just to be clear, do you
I'm
need me
sorry.
to follow up on a virtual option or no?
I don't think so. Thinking
Okay.
back though, we wanted to record it. Didn't we record one of the EDISCO meetings? You recall? I feel like-
We did, trying to figure out, we may have done the broad as well, but, I'll have to see if anybody in DES is available, to do that. So I can follow up on that.
Okay, that, at a minimum, we might consider trying to do a recording, but I don't think we'll try to do any live streaming or virtual.
The easiest way to record it would be to make it virtual and not have anybody attend.
Could
It'd be
do that.
real easy to do.
Yeah, I guess we could just bring our owl and do the same thing. So. Okay. Just a quick rehash of what we're gonna do over the next week. You're gonna review the River Basin plan and the executive summary. You're gonna send me comments by next Tuesday. We have a short window then to incorporate your final edits, so hopefully your final edits are minimal. We will finalize the plan, the draft plan, draft executive summary, get it posted by the end of next week. I'm gonna miss it. We'll do a 2-page summary sheet, circulate that. And sometime before the 18th, we'll schedule a virtual meeting with our volunteer presenters to walk through this. In the meantime, we'll start making some edits on these slides that we discussed today, and we can fine tune those during that probably no more than 1 hour virtual meeting.
It's just 3 of us, right? For the presentation.
I think it's just the 3 of you, yeah.
So I'm happy to get together in person beforehand, if that'd be helpful. It wouldn't be hard to find, we wouldn't have to come up here. I'm in North Charleston when I'm at home.
Yeah, I can come
So,
up, come that way and maybe we meet somewhere in between. Where do you live?
What's your plan?
I got solar.
I think this is your last chance.
I'd like to see, I'm just trying to maximize the impact.
Yeah.
I have one and I can see land on it. It's all coming together.
And Paul.
Let's do that. Let's really good listen plan.
That sounds good.
And we'll figure out one.
Okay.
That'll be great. I'd like to see it.
They'll give you the tour, dude.
I want to see the solar drive.
Yeah, I think
I've,
You want to see the solar drive, you just don't know.
no, I have wanted to come and see where my CPW build comes from, and I just haven't gotten there.
yeah, y'all are just kind of handling the front and the back of the presentation.
All right, I'll send you y'all's presentation.
Not here.
As it stands, you can call me if I'm.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
That'd be good.
Okay, anything else, Michael, you want to? Thank you. All right, thank you, everyone.
Did a great job.
Yep, I appreciate everybody. Thank you, Ben.
We have, I'm glad, Ray will be cats.
Yeah.
I love it.
Then me, we'll just get one.
Jason does, there's one.